Thank you. And have you started the recording? All right. Thank you. Welcome everyone today. I'm just going to do the official introduction for hybrid meetings, if you'll bear with me. So good morning and welcome to the November meeting of the Planning Committee. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile phones on or electronic devices on silent if they have one near them. And those present in the room should face towards the speaker directly into their microphones, speaking directly into their microphones, and not place papers or electronic devices between themselves and the microphone. Please would remote participants mute microphones when not speaking, as this will reduce feedback and background noise and save bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. Members of the Council joining us remotely should leave cameras on. Officers leave cameras on only for the agenda item you're speaking to. Members of the public registered to speak for or against an application and parish and town council representatives will be called to speak after the officers have presented their application. Members of the public attending remotely will be asked to leave the meeting once their item has been completed. After each item has been presented, I will invite members present in the room to ask questions first. Those members joining us remotely will then be invited to speak, and they should indicate their wish to speak by doing so by using the raise of the hand facility. Only those members of the Planning Committee present in the room will be making the decisions, and I will confirm the result verbally for the benefit of those watching at the end of the webcast. If we have a need for a break, we will stop for a comfort break during the procedure. That's that. So, the first item on the agenda is the minutes, and I believe there are a couple of requests for adjustments. So I'm going to ask for those. I think Councillor Errington, you had a query that you wanted to place before the committee.
Yes, regards to the town hall and the number of car parking spaces, there are currently 96 and it was being reduced to 48.
And so you'd like it changed from 144 to 96, is that correct?
Yeah.
That's not a material change. It wasn't part of the reason for refusal, so unless anyone has a real objection, I wouldn't suggest that that's an issue. I will actually just take a vote on that particular item, so we can agree that. Is everyone, those in favour of making that change? Those against? Any? No? Did you vote, Councillor Curtis? No. Okay, that was unanimous. That was unanimous, thank you. The second item was one raised by Bexhill Heritage. Well, they raised two. They asked for the section when their representative spoke to be changed to the Planning Committee heard from the spokesperson on behalf of Bexhill Heritage, which is not supportive of the scheme. And they asked those words to be used to replace the Planning Committee heard from a spokesperson from Bexhill Heritage who was not supportive of the scheme. Do you want me to read those out again? They sound very similar, don't they? So they would like it to say, the Planning Committee heard from the spokesperson on behalf of Bexhill Heritage, which is not supportive of the scheme. We'll just ask, vote on that one. Yes, is everyone happy with that? Yeah? I think that's unanimous too. All right, so Bexhill Heritage did also ask for the decision, the way the decision was written to be changed. And I did have quite a long discussion with the development manager about this, and with any reversal, we always have quite a long discussion, both at the meeting and after the meeting when the draft minutes are done. The Bexhill Heritage asked for the decision to be changed to the words, the proposed new town hall extension by way of its design, bulk and height would have an unacceptable impact. Now, my own view, for you to agree or not to agree, is that decisions, if an applicant objects to the way a decision is written, I think there's a case for discussion. If a third party does, I think that's sort of probably not where a committee needs to go. You know, the committee makes a decision on the wording, and the wording was discussed at length by the proposer, who was Councillor Barnes at the time, with the development manager. My recommendation would be to not accept that for those reasons. Does anyone have any questions? Or yes, Councillor Prochak.
Thank you. Yes, my question, in the light of that comment, was that is the recommendation or the approval that we've given based just on design, is that specific enough? Because it was highlighted that it needs to be specific. Yes. And according to the advice we've got from our legal advisor, is that design is specific enough. That was the advice that was given. That's just all I wanted to say.
Councillor Barnes?
Yes, mine was similar, but I think that one needs to possibly dress up in what way the design wasn't. There was a problem with the design, and maybe the minutes should actually reflect what that problem was.
Yeah, I think we've taken legal advice on this, and I think the decision notice is sound. It also does raise impact on the heritage assets. I mean, I do think too, if anything was challenged, you look at the notes, you look at the discussion, you look at all of these things leading up to the decision, and I think it's quite clear that was the main issue in the end. So I think I would be happy with the wording of this decision. It was agreed with the development manager, with the proposer, the chair, and that's the decision notes that went out.
Councillor Ganley.
Chairman, was it not said in the meeting that there were objections raised about the fourth floor, the dimension of the building, the size, the bulk? Was that not spoken of at the meeting?
It was, but ultimately that wasn't the reason for refusal. You're in a town centre area with 4 stories.
Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that, because in my view, that was part of the reason for refusing it. Part of the reason I refused it.
Okay, so I think the issue that Miles just touched upon is the decision notice has actually been issued, and the decision notice reflects what's in the current minutes, which is always a bit tricky because you can't actually rescind that decision note.
Yeah, but what is being said is that those minutes are wrong.
Well, why don't we ask Jaspreet, the lawyer, to come in on this point, because it's important. Jaspreet, are you with us? Could you just...
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Could you have...
I mean, fundamentally, the decision the situation as described by Miles is what the position from the council's point of view should be, i.e. that design is reflected and specifically referenced in the decision notice as it was agreed with the proposer, and individuals will be able to read in the context from the minutes and discussion, but there isn't a need to amend that part of the resolution or decision notice as articulated in the minutes.
Sorry, but there's not a need. Well, I think there is a need. We discussed this, and we felt, I think a number of people felt, that the bulk and size and of the, particularly in relation to the 4th floor, was excessive.
And that is reflected in the minutes. Is it not? That is reflected in the minutes. It's not reflected in that part of the resolution, but that's, to all intents and purposes, not the point. The minutes are supposed to accurately reflect what the proposer, chair, and development manager agreed at the time, which is what that is reflected in the resolution.
I don't understand this.
You can't. It's not possible to read in after the event words that were not agreed at that moment in time. Now, yeah, if the proposer, the development manager, and the chair agreed the words that are in the resolution, then that's what should be in the minutes. Now, obviously, after the event, if people would like to read into this decision and look behind what happened, then the rest of the minutes are what are instructive in that regard. But fundamentally, when you're talking about what the resolution should say, it should accurately reflect what was agreed between the proposer, the chair, and the development manager.
Yes. What my point is that I think, I may be wrong, I haven't looked at the recording of the meeting recently, but I was fairly confident that we had put that forward as part of the reason, the bulk.
If I could interrupt, I mean, Councillor Barnes actually did agree the wording with the development manager. That's why we have that adjournment, to give that sort of breathing space for people to think about the words and whatever. And I think it's very easy to read into things afterwards, or you have a different view. But and this is why we had a discussion to ensure that the word design was sufficient to cover that. And I think the other issue you have is with these reversals, decision notices go out straight away, and the decision notice actually reflects that. And revoking a decision notice is quite a serious issue, because an applicant can have all sorts of recourse against you if you do that. I think for the purposes of it, it's unlikely to be. The decision is unlikely to go to appeal, I would have thought. I think you have to look at it pragmatically. It can't be appealed. Well, it can't actually. This decision can't be appealed. There is no right of appeal on this application, so it doesn't really make that much difference in terms of a challenge. Well, then they can't.
If it assists you, Chair, the Town and Country Planning Act General Regulations 1992, which govern how an application made by an authority to itself should be dealt with, and it specifically removes the right of appeal. So there is no right for an appeal to be lodged in relation to this application.
Can we vote on that? I don't think we need to vote on that, because there's no vote on that. Huh? We're not voting on anything because there's no proposal to change. All I'm asking for you is authorisation to sign the minutes with those two previous. Okay, thank you very much. Move that away. All right. Moving along. Can we have apologies for absences, please?
Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Drayson, and Councillor Langlands is standing in as his substitute today.
Very nice to have you back, Councillor Langlands. I don't believe we have any additional items on the agenda, and I don't believe we have any withdrawn applications either. Can we have disclosures of interest, please? Yes, Councillor Mear.
Yes, Chairman. Agenda item number 8, the former Market Garden Fairlight. Personal interest, I live very close by.
All right, good. You're not excluding yourself from the vote on this?
Personal interest only, and I'm not excluding myself.
All right, thank you very much. Good. That takes us forward onto the planning index, which lists the applications, and the first item is a deferral, which is Kingswood Hill, application RR 2020-1613P, and I think Matt is going to present this, aren't you, Matt? Good, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. This application was deferred at the July 2022 Planning Committee for more information on the deliverability of the DASA allocated sites. So we've got the one in Battle off Loose Farm Lane and the 5 in Bexhill. And also for more information on the education of the children who live on the site. Since July committee, we as a council have had an up-to-date accommodation needs assessment for Gypsy, Traveller and Travelling Show People published. This has been produced in jointly with neighbouring authorities in East Sussex to get an up-to-date idea of the needs of the district for the next, well, almost 20 years. This survey indicates that the targets in the core strategy, which said 6 more pitches were required, they are out of date, and we do need more pitches if they, well, over that 20-year period. It also backed up that the council may not currently have a 5-year supply of pitches. You're also aware of the appeal decision at Loose Farm Lane, Battle, where the appeal was allowed. And in that decision, there were, doubt was put on the deliverability of the allocated DASA sites. The concern was that there were no permissions for the Bexhill site. Only outline permission existed for 2 of the pitches. That a further application would be required, so reserve matters and full permission for the rest of them. The other drawback was the application was not made by the landowner, and the intentions of the landowner remained unclear. That situation hasn't changed in the past 9-10 months. No reserve matters application has come in for Bexhill. No full application has come in at Bexhill. Similar for the single Battle site off Loose Farm Lane. And there's uncertainty over deliverability. And as it stands now, they're not available or deliverable. So, moving on to the education of the children, in August we received headed paper letters from 2 local schools confirming the 2 children had been in attendance since 2020 up until the date they wrote those letters, so 2 years. In addition to the issues that the application was deferred for, we have received a Phase 1 ecological report. You'll probably recall that there is a pond to the south of the site in the neighbouring properties garden. And it's in an area where, a red area for great crested newts. The ecological survey picks up on the red zone, but it identifies the application size of being low ecological value. We have consulted the county newt officer or nature space who do the district licensing on the ecological report. They've reviewed the information and they agree that impacts on great crested newts would be very low. They recommend reasonable avoidance measures, which are detailed in the ecological report. Recommended condition 7 on the report secures this work to be carried out in accordance with the reasonable avoidance measures, and they're listed in the table within the report. So in summary, as reported at the July committee, whilst there is some limited harm to the AONB, significant weight can be attributed to the personal circumstances of the family, including the best interest of the children, which has now been backed up by evidence of attendance at local schools for the past 2 years. Significant weight can also be attributed to the uncertainty surrounding the deliverability of the DASA allocated sites and the accommodation needs demonstrated in the latest accommodation needs survey. In officers' view, these considerations outweigh the limited harm to the AONB, and therefore the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So it's just a reminder, really, to the committee and to those speaking that this is a deferred application, and it was deferred for 3 primary reasons: ecology, the evidence in relation to the school, the children in the school, and the need for pitches in Rother. Those are the 3 reasons, and so we are limited to the discussion onto those 3 points, as difficult as that might be. When you defer, you really can only deal with those issues that you've dealt with before, which is the same for the speakers who will speak today. So I think that's just an important warning, if you like. I know it's very hard to try and go back, but you can't go back to other issues. We have 2 speakers. We have a speaker from Brede Parish Council, and I welcome Stephen Hampson, who's going to speak, and I invite you to come forward. I think you've been coached on the ropes. The one thing you just have to remember is to turn your microphone off when you're finished speaking, because otherwise the camera doesn't move around. So whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes, and then questions if people would like to ask you questions. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you for a further opportunity to comment on this application. In essence, it is to recognise and extend the buildings of a traveller's site on agricultural land alongside a listed building in an area of outstanding natural beauty. I say recognise rather than establish, because in effect it's already established, contravening planning applications. There's little need to set out the objections more fully than in the public document pack. That states clearly that use of this land as a gypsy and traveller's site would cause harm, though perhaps limited, to the character and appearance of this rural area. And the application conflicts with the development plan and with national policies for an AONB. That view is strongly supported by the 102 local objections sent directly to you. The individual policies that this application contravenes are set out in paragraph 9.3. I won't read them all out. It would take a while. But surely residents should have the right to expect that the very strictest criteria will always be applied in an AONB. It's also outside the development boundary. Each time these policies are ignored will make it easier for the next applicant to cite an exception. It's within the Brede landscape area, and mobile homes are certainly not characteristic of that area. Important considerations including access off a busy twisting road and foul water drainage are also worth consideration. A recent application of a traveller's site in Stub Lane, Brede, was rightly refused. You concluded that it would significantly harm the appearance of the AONB, and this would be compounded by the erection of a day room. There is little difference, Chairman, between the 2 applications, as the site under consideration today would also include a substantial day room once extended. Similarly, development of a field belonging to the old manor house, which is very close to the land in question, was comprehensively rejected in July. There were many reasons for that, but the first 2 cited were that it was outside the development boundary and contrary to the policies of an AONB. So why is it being entertained at all? In mitigation, the public document dwells on 2 aspects mentioned this morning. First is the moving school would be detrimental to the children. That puzzles me, because if you look at the studies over the years, and I hope your officials did look at the literature and not just go on individual opinion, the long-term damage to children is when they are moved multiple times, such as for a travelling family on the road. That's not what we're talking about here. Indeed, many parents deliberately take the opportunity to move house when their children are young. I hope that your discussion will include this aspect. Secondly, the public document expresses doubt about the deliverability of the allocated DASA sites, even though, as mentioned, the appeal against the site at Netherfield Hill Battle found no evidence that the allocated sites would not be deliverable. As for the future, the recent consultancy report recommended additional sites is no more than an evidence base for consultation. Whatever need is finally decided, there will surely be time to find suitable sites without accepting one that contravenes so many regulations. Lastly, I would remind you that this application is in part retrospective. So if you agree to it, it seems to us in Brede that in due course we'll find another caravan or stable on another section of the land, followed by another retrospective application that will probably be agreed. In summary, Chairman, Brede Parish Council and the local residents believe that this application should not be supported because it is outside the development boundary and in an AONB. There are subsidiary concerns such as foul water and access, which are set out in the previous submissions and objections. It has much in common with other applications that have been rejected. We find no evidence that moving schools would harm the children, nor do we concede that there is an overriding pressure to agree further G&T sites at this stage. And we are deeply concerned that a wrong decision would set a dangerous precedent for development of other areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well practiced to the minute. I very much appreciate that. And we always very much appreciate the parish representatives coming along. So I'll open it to the floor to ask any questions of Mr. Hampson. Does anyone wish to ask a question, Mr. Hampson? Yes, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Stephen, for coming in today, for speaking for the Brede Council, Parish Council. So we agree there's 2 sites already in quite a small... Brede is a small settlement, would you agree? And we already have 2 active sites in Brede of travellers.
In Brede?
In Brede, yeah. So we have Stub Lane and we have...
But those have both been rejected in planning.
Yes, but they're still active at the moment. Though,
okay,
so,
yes,
yeah.
we have.
So they are technically active, they haven't been enforced, yes. Indeed. So it's possibly that may well continue, possibly. Mm-hmm. And do you agree there's been a lot of interest in the public concern to the parish council?
There is a great deal of concern. We've had many phone calls. I had 4, I think, yesterday afternoon, and there's previously been a lot of concern expressed. Yes.
Councillor Gordon, can I just interrupt you there for a minute? The objective of the question is not to put your opinion and ask for agreement. It's to ask a question of the applicant. So, do you agree that is not a question? That's. Would you agree with my opinion? So, if you could just ask questions of the applicant, of the.
Okay, that's understood. Okay, that's fine. That's all that I have for you, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah, do we have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Prochak.
Thank you for your presentation and thank you so much for coming along. How long have this family been on this particular site, do you know?
I think the next speaker will be in a better position to answer that one accurately. I have something in my head, but the neighbour is here and I'm sure she'll tell you accurately.
Further questions? No? Thank you very much. Thank you for coming and presenting. We now have a speaker against the applicant, and that is Pam Spence, who is the neighbour. So I'd like to invite you forward, Pam. Thank you. Morning. Well, let's hope you don't have a coughing fit, but you need to put the microphone on. The trick is to put the microphone on when you're speaking and to turn it off when you're not.
Considering the interests of the children as the main reason for recommending approving planning permission for a traveller site in the AONB goes against the advice given in the PPTS. Concerns are raised about the disruption to the children's education if they have to move. The Planning Office was made aware when the family first moved onto the field over 2 years ago. So why was concern that the children have been moved from schools then not raised? Other planning decisions have decided children can achieve similar benefits on other sites. In this case, the eldest child would not even have to move schools if they moved to the Bexhill site, as it is roughly the same distance as from Brede. The other main reason, weighing heavily in favour of the application, is that it is unclear if there is a site available for the family to move to, though even the GTAA states there are 4 unutilised pitches in Rother. However, paragraph 27 of the PPTS states, even if a local planning authority cannot demonstrate an up-to-date 5-year supply of deliverable sites, this does not need to be considered when the proposed site is in the AONB. The applicant states they will be homeless if planning is refused. This suggests they were homeless before moving. If so, why didn't they move onto the field while the applicant was building the stable block? The applicant was there during the day, suggesting he was living within easy commuting distance, and the children only came at weekends and school holidays, suggesting they were attending schools. There is evidence the applicant was established in Ashford for at least 8 years prior to moving to Brede. The address of the applicant's mother is a permanent Gypsy Traveller site in Ashford, which has at least 4 pitches. And in 2014, the applicant himself was given planning permission to put 3 mobile homes there. This site is also the registered address of the applicant's roofing business, which has received reviews from customers around Ashford since 2016, suggesting he was based in the area. If an investigation proves the applicant really does not have anywhere else to go, and if there is a wait for alternative sites, why can't the application be refused and an extended compliance period given until a site becomes available? Long term, this would protect the AONB, but give stability to the applicant. The government advises that great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing the landscape and scenic beauty of the AONB, and the council has a duty as stewards of the countryside to protect the AONB. But already breaches in planning of the stable block adversely affect the local character and scenic beauty, breaches not addressed by the report. No conditions for building in the AONB are applied to the proposed day room. Is this even needed with the greater size of the proposed new mobile home? The increase in visual impact of the larger mobile home is ignored, as is the repositioning of the touring caravan nearer to the neighbouring Grade 2 listed cottage, close to its back door and kitchen window. The report suggests local residents will only see a glimpse of the site as we drive or walk past. When leaves have fallen, the site is visible from the road and pavement all the way from the village hall and from the surrounding countryside as far as the Udimore Road. All year round, the site is easily seen from neighbouring properties and the footpath to the east. The footpath is very integral to our community. It is used by locals and tourists to access the open countryside, to walk between Brede and Broadoak, and to the local fishing pond, which is only about 25 yards away from the caravans. Incorrect statements are made, such as there is only 1 residential unit when there are 4. It likens caravans to polytunnels in an area which was primarily farming and agricultural. Polytunnels would not appear out of place, but caravans, day rooms, mobile homes and television aerials do. The government aims for fair and equal treatment for gypsies and travellers while respecting the interests of the settled community. But the report shows no respect, ignoring all concerns raised about the adverse impact on the amenity of near neighbours. There were 70 original objections, not 58 as stated in the report, and 25 more since the deferral, showing how important the AONB is to local residents. Please don't allow this part of the AONB to be destroyed by approving an application based on incorrect information, a report containing many errors, and a recommendation based on points not supported by the PPTS, especially when there is an alternative solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So can we have some questions from the committee, please? Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Pam, for coming in today. Pam, are there deciduous trees around the site?
Yes, it's all deciduous. Yes, in fact, it's all deciduous.
So in the winter, do the leaves fall off?
They do, yes.
Thank you. Pam, another question for you. Have you had any nuisance problems at all?
Yes, I have, and they have been reported to the Environmental Health and Planning.
Have you got any idea, give us some idea what that might be?
Didn't realise you needed the details. Yeah, there's they keep a dog in a dog pen
Sorry, just
on
to
the back of the.
Just to interrupt on that one. Environmental health issues are not planning issues.
Thank you, Chair. Any more questions? Thank you.
It's a learning experience. Sorry, Councillor Gordon. Yes, Councillor Barnes.
Hello. Could you just tell us exactly what is in the field, apart from what I presume, having read the report, is just a caravan and maybe a travelling caravan? What in fact are you looking at?
Do you mean that's there now? Well, there's 2 stable blocks. They live in one of them. There's a touring caravan, and there's an old mobile home with a large television aerial sticking out the back. On the back of the stable block, they've built a dog pen and a storage area.
Any other questions? Yeah. Did you have another question, Councillor Barnes?
I'm just. What kind of area is this taking up? I mean, if you had to sort of.
I think you can see on the screen the officers put a picture up for you. We can talk about that during the discussion if you like. All right. Are there any other questions for the speaker? Any other questions? Thank you very much, Pam. Very much, thank you. So before we just go on to discussion, and I'll be asking Councillor Gordon to speak, this was actually called in by myself about 2 years ago, and the reason for that is not that it's not in my ward, I'm in the next ward along, but at that time the then councillor wasn't available, and so I think I was contacted by a number of residents recognising there was quite a lot of local interest, and that was the right approach to take. That was, believe it or not, 2 years ago, so this has been running for some long time. So Councillor Gordon, being a ward member now, and I'm sure you're very up to date on this, I'm going to ask you to speak. So the parish council is quite strongly opposed to this, and I gather you're quite supportive of that position, yeah?
I take a sort of neutral view on it at the moment, I'm afraid, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to see, the best decision made. Yeah.
Good. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So I believe there's a lot of interest generated in Breed. Breed is a town of around about 1,700 people, and so far there are 2 active sites. Obviously, the settled community need to be looked after, and so do the travellers need to be looked after. It's an area of AONB land, and there is a pathway that passes actually not through the planning area, but to the north there is a footpath where horses are kept, which is the property of the applicant. And it's quite a busy footpath used by people from Breed and Broadacre, transiting between the 2 settlements.
I'm going to stop you again. I'm sorry, I really do apologise. Planning is a very frustrating thing, as you'll learn over time. I know this is just your 3rd meeting. This was deferred for 3 reasons: ecology, the evidence in relation to the school, and the need for pitches within the ONB. It is very frustrating not to be able to talk about other things which were talked about, but it wasn't deferred for those reasons. And if you start forming an opinion or even an approval or refusal, whatever, based on things that aren't reasons for deferral, it really is evidence for a challenge or an appeal if that should occur. I think I'm correct in saying that, aren't I? Yeah. So I know it's really frustrating, but that's where we have to go on these ones.
That's understood, Chair, but 2 years ago I wasn't a councillor. I was flying for British Airways as a pilot. So
that's all right. No, we very much appreciate this.
So I don't know. Yeah, that I totally accept, and I'll start again. Education-wise, with Matt, question I'd like to know eventually is that report. I think was that August 2020, I believe. So have attended or are attending the local school. I'll be interested to know the answer to that one when we start asking questions on that.
Matt?
We received. The letters we've received are dated August 2022. They say the children have been in attendance at the school since 2020.
The other thing, it is on an area of outstanding natural beauty, and even if a 5-year plan is not deliverable, it cannot be used as an argument to give planning permission on AONB. Is that correct? Do I understand that as correct?
It relates back to the comment made by the speaker that regardless of whether pictures are deliverable. Yeah?
So section 27 of the PPTS.
It's a reasonable point to ask. Some discussion. Really a good question. So I think so. Yes, go on.
More questions?
So just bear with me.
Chair, yeah, I have got some more
Okay,
questions.
I'll
But,
give way.
you know,
Right, sorry for the delay. It'd probably be useful if I read out paragraph 27 of the PPTS, which is the National Policy for Gypsy and Travellers. It says, if a local planning authority cannot demonstrate an up-to-date 5-year supply of deliverable sites, which is what we're saying in this case, this should be a significant material consideration in any subsequent planning decision when considering applications for the grant of temporary planning permission. The exception is where the proposal is on land designated as greenbelt, sites protected under the Birds and Habitats Directives, and or sites designated as sites of special scientific interest, local green space, AONB, or a national park. I mean, to me, it reads that it relates to temporary planning permission.
Yeah.
We're talking about a permanent permission here.
To interject, isn't that a problem then? I mean, permanent is greater than temporary.
There's still a planning balance and a tilted balance.
Yeah.
might I say something? Yeah, please. Yeah, surely temporary and permanent, as you rightly point out, Chair, surely temporary is permanent is, if we're going to grant permanent, obviously that's surely the legality of it all. It's got to be stronger, isn't it?
Does this point need clarification away from the meeting? I mean, no, I don't really want to refer, but there seems to be a discussion going on.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a tilted balance here, and you've got the AONB, you've got the planning balance. Yes, you can't demonstrate a 5-year supply. Deliverability is a doubt. There's some limited harm to the AONB, that's what it says in the report, and how it's limited. The balance is then against keeping children in school, the confirmed gypsy and traveller status, and the fact there's no objections in terms of highway, that ecology issues can be mitigated by condition, and that it's really looking at the planning balance here. So I would say this is a fair point to make, but it's looking at the round, and this is part of the argument.
If you want to continue, just with whatever you'd like to say, because I think there's a couple more questions coming in. You can hold this thought. I mean, this is don't take lost because you finished speaking about it.
The other question I was going to ask you, Matt, was the foul water. I think so there's a septic tank that the foul water is discharged into. When we did a visit there, I didn't see a septic tank. So,
what are you making comments in relation to the septic tank? Because the three issues once again.
Okay, so
three issues:
environmental, basically. So have we covered the environmental bit? I can't mention that, or
well, you can if it's an issue which affects the ecology. The report basically says that there's a whole ecological report, and the condition is that they have to abide by that. They have to fulfil all the conditions within that. So one would imagine that any sewage that the officer can confirm would be dealt with. So if there was going to be sewage affecting the ecology of the site, then it would not. They would not discharge that condition unless it was managed. I think is correct. Is that
Matt?
Correct?
Is there a septic tank on the site?
I understand there's a temporary solution on the site contained within the back of the stable block, like a sealed container which collects sewage. I think if you look on the plans, there is a separate tank indicated which is proposed, be subject to environmental licences.
The sewage is contained. I think the point is
at
this point in time the sewage is contained.
It's emptied. Yeah. So a contractor comes and empties the tank. It's not. We've been told it's not discharged to the land or water courses or the like.
You're continuing, or
I think I've said my piece.
Okay.
Actually.
Oh, you can come back and talk later.
Okay.
Councillor Procher.
I just wanted to pick up, and I'm glad that you, Councillor Gordon, has raised this, because the area that I seek clarification on is the basis on which we are saying, giving permission. The school children, that's fine, that's obviously been proved, that's okay, that they are attending local schools. But the actual 5-year supply, this is the part that I am not clear about, because we seem to have changed tack totally because of the loose farm appeal, by the inspector saying, we haven't got the 5-year supply, and we may not have allocated sites already being in the ownership of somebody who would like to deliver them as gypsy and traveller site. We don't know that yet. We have no evidence at all for that yet, that the allocated traveller site in North Bexhill will not be available. Nobody said it's not available. Indeed, there was a planning application and the owner did not respond to it. So I've got a problem with the inspector making us say this should be approved. And then there's other 2 sites that I didn't really know about, which were mentioned in the presentations, that there were 2 sites in the AONB in Breed that we had turned down because of AONB. So I don't know about those sites. So to me, and I have to say, I do know about gypsy and traveller sites. I've got the only one that's permanent in my patch. And also, we went through such a divisive consultation about sites when we did the last local plan. It was a dreadful operation. So to me, there doesn't seem to be what they've called overriding pressure. And so I would like to be reassured about that we're making the decision not just on an inspector's comments on one application, but on the actual, because we haven't even identified other sites. We haven't gone out to consultation. So it seems to me this is a premature approval. It seems at the moment. So I'd like reassurance.
Who would you like reassurance from? The officer.
Okay, so the Loose Farm Lane appeal, allowing that appeal, there were doubts put on the allocated sites, and the fact that the Bexhill site only outlined that permission had been granted for 2 pitches, no further reserve matters, there's no planning permission on the other 3 pitches, and also the fact that the application was not made by the landowner. We've had very little back from the landowner over intentions. Their intentions remain unclear, and that's where the big question mark comes. Yes, you're correct. We haven't got evidence saying they will not be delivered, but also we haven't got a time frame saying they will be delivered by 2024, 25. We don't know, and that's where the uncertainty comes. And this position has been backed up by this latest Gypsy and Traveller accommodation needs survey, which we commissioned as background evidence in preparation for the new local plan. And yeah, I mean, as officers, we feel that assessment has strengthened the position of the inspector at the Highview appeal, that we may not currently have a deliverable 5-year supply of pitches. And definitely the targets in the core strategy, which said 6 pitches are required, that's out of date. The needs have changed in the past, 11 years or more, so which isn't a surprise. So the new local plan will have to allocate new pitches. Hope that's helped.
New local plan, would we choose this one?
Councillor Stevens, I think you've been...
Thank you, Chair. What worries me about this is it's outside the development boundary, in an area of natural beauty, and very close to a Grade 2 listed building. We wouldn't put a dwelling there, so why a traveller's site?
So
I mean, it's just not in the right area.
I've just got to wind it back a bit. I think it feels like the ecology and the school evidence issues are dealt with. The issue is the one for need for pitches, yeah, and that does relate to the AONB, as well.
Well, children can move schools. I mean, I just think it's not in the right area. It's an area of natural beauty. Thank you.
There has to be a rationale behind that in this circumstance, because Gypsies and Travellers do fall under a very their own particular planning policy, as we know. The point is that they fall under a specific category, which is another part of the rule book, if you like. I've got Councillor Ganley, then Councillor Byrne.
I just said something on in the countryside. It is, but it's a sustainable location, and that is in the report, given the access to services.
Councillor Ganley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad you raised the point about it's in the rules, you said.
Well, Gypsy and Travellers...
Gypsy and Travellers.
There is a specific policy which relates to Gypsies and Travellers.
Yes. There are rules for Gypsy and Travellers, and there are different rules for settled community. And I am totally opposed to that difference. It creates dissension and division between the two communities, settled and travellers. And there should not be 2 separate laws. On this site, a settled person has been refused planning permission, and it looks now as though a traveller will be given permission. I don't think that's right.
I think you just have to be a little bit careful because they are actually a protected community.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
And this is why I made the point that I totally disagree with the law. The law, in my view, is an ass.
Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. Being reasonably new to planning, it seems strange we can have a site in the DASA, and however, so it is a site of potential travel. What makes it undeliverable? Are there set criteria for deliverable or undeliverable, or is it a matter of opinion? Or could you just run me through the areas of consideration that make a site potentially available but undeliverable?
Sure. Who would like to answer that question? Quiet today, I have to say.
I'm not a presenter.
I don't think I've heard you so quiet, or not heard you so.
Well, I'm not a presenting officer.
Okay, that's a good answer, I suppose. Matt.
Okay. Again, I think it's useful to refer directly to the policy and the MPPF and the definition we've got in there for deliverable. And to be considered deliverable, sites have to be available now, offer a suitable location for development now, and be achievable with a realistic prospect that it will be delivered within 5 years. I think the problem we've got here is about the here and now because of the question marks about the allocated sites in Bexhill. We've only got outline permission, and that application was made by a third party. And we're waiting for the reserve matters. We haven't got any permission on the other 3 pitches at Bexhill. And we really don't know what the clear intentions of the landowner are. We've had comments saying they don't intend to prejudice the delivery of allocated sites, but there's no actions to bring them forward. And that's where the question mark lies, really, and hence why we can't say they're deliverable now.
Okay. So there is really, what you're saying is the difference is it can be potentially a site, but there are reasonably well-defined criteria for saying potentially, but not now, and therefore it is not currently available or deliverable.
Actually, we don't know.
We
don't know that it isn't.
We don't know.
I've got Councillor Madeley next.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just a matter for clarification, and perhaps you can put me right. You have quite rightly mentioned 3 items, or the 3 reasons that we're making this decision today. But the thing that gets to me so often is this word retrospective. If we're not discussing retrospection, then why is it still within the application? Do I make sense?
Yeah, it is part retrospective, the application. We are permitted to consider retrospective applications.
We have no choice.
You have to deal with a retrospective on the same basis as if it was a fresh application.
Chair, is it helpful just to explain? We just have to refer to retrospective because of the legislation just puts retrospective applications under a slightly different power, that's all. So you just have to, we're basically just quoting the origin of the power to make an application. That's why the word retrospective is used. But fundamentally, the criteria are exactly the same as a prospective application.
they have to be dealt with on the same basis as if it was a fresh application, and there wasn't anything there.
Thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to raise it because I have a thing about retrospective.
Go on, if you like.
Sorry to interrupt whoever's next, but on page 21, there's 8.14.1. There's this absolutely wonderful paragraph which says that it's government policy that intentional and unauthorised development is a material consideration.
Which paragraph?
8.14.1. It should be weighed in the determination of planning applications and appeals. The written ministerial statement announcing the policy expressed concern, and there's always, as you're behind your question, is the concern whether development of land has been undertaken in advance and there is no opportunity to appropriately limit or mitigate the harm. But the paragraph then goes on to say very clearly that, however, it does say this policy is not clear about retrospective, but the planning system is not intended to be punitive, but to secure compliance. So sometimes I think retrospective is useful for us because we can see what's there.
Well, I think I don't think this is not a point to linger on, really. I think most people understand that retrospective, the purpose of the planning system is also to ensure that if something is there and would have planning permission, it's given it and regularised with conditions and so forth. It doesn't. It's not treated punitively. I think it's always important to remind everyone of that. Councillor Gagnon, I had you down. Did you still want to speak? Because you. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Following on from Matt's explanation of what is available and what's not available, some of these sites have outline planning permission. So presumably, my question is this, is what is required now a detailed application, a reserved matters application, in order for them sites to become available?
Yes, the site for 2 pitches with outline would need reserved matters. And I think in addition, we would need, to say it's deliverable, we need information about when it's going to be built, by who. Well, potentially, yeah. Instead of just, we have no intention of prejudicing the policy allocations, we need a bit more than that. They will put the site on the open market for someone else to develop. No, so sorry, I was talking afterwards. So if we got the reserved matters application and that was approved, then you would, I'm saying in addition, you would then, to make it deliverable, we'd need information about when it was going to be built out. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Langlands, yeah.
Yes, on the basis of what I'm hearing and the fact that we're creating a new local plan, is there any way this can be temporary planning? You know, I mean, does it need to be a permanent planning decision we make here today?
That is an option, yeah. But then I think if you're going down that route, we need to think about timescales and when is the new local plan likely to be in place.
Well, you'll have a plan that's certainly at an advanced stage by next year, won't you? Going to Regulation 18 consultation. It's a thought. I've got Councillor Meir next, and then Councillor Barnes.
Mine, Chair, was a very different point, which is perhaps interrupting the flow of the debate, but I'll say it very briefly. And that is, I take it that I'm precluded from raising the point about permitted development rights, whereby if we granted permission, then a caravan on a licensed site can be replaced by one up to 20 metres long without further planning permission. I take it that I'm precluded from raising that as a potential condition of removal of permitted development rights, because we didn't defer on that basis.
I think that perhaps relates to conditions. So that's,
yes.
that's I think you slipped under the net on that one, Andrew. Well done. Congratulations. I'll be referring Councillor Gordon to you for training.
Perhaps as the debates goes on.
Well, if we're looking at temporary use, then condition number 2 is that the site shall not be occupied by any persons other than gypsies and travellers. Okay, but restricted to only the couple and at the moment it says dependents. And since we're concerned about the children, could we not consider the children as long as they are at school and only their children? So that I gather they have 3 children. When the last of those 3 children has left school, they must move from the site.
Good question.
I think it's a fairly standard condition, and I think to pare it down further, in my view, wouldn't be reasonable. But if you also mentioned temporary permission. It wouldn't really apply with a temporary grant because it would be over a rather shorter duration. I mean, saying that it would have to come back for a permanent grant of permission after that time had expired.
So I think the sort of corollary to the question about temporary permission is if the temporary permission was given for a period and after that period, for example, the new local plan had come forward and other sites would be sites which perhaps had greater confidence of deliverability were available, then the temporary permission may not go forward if those other sites are there for location. I think that's the point being made. Is that something which is that statement correct?
So that's broadly correct. But I was also making another point about if members are looking at that as a possibility, then perhaps that wouldn't apply. And that the condition in itself I would consider to be reasonable and proportionate. Thank you.
Councillor Langlands, then we might try and sort of round up here a bit.
Sorry, can I just propose then that we go for temporary accommodation? Permission.
Councillor Rochak?
Before Councillor Lang asked that question, I was going along that thought process that I always listen very carefully to the modal verbs that our officers use. And it's... I do. The modal verbs. Modal. And the modal verbs that our officers use are may. And so there's a big question mark for me. I mean, what is to stop this particular family applying for planning permission on the Bexhill site? There are 2 there with outline permission.
Yeah.
So it's these questions in my mind that we're not denying them a place to live.
They're denying themselves.
So temporary is I think, perhaps the way forward. I would second.
Just to make a comment, in the nature of town and country planning, modal verbs are used rather a lot by planning officers.
I should make a point that Google Translate can't translate planning officers speak.
Oh.
It's the only thing it can't translate.
On us or Google Translate?
Well, yeah. Look, okay, so we have a proposal which is different. Yes, you can quickly, and then I'll round up.
Further to my question, can I just then have clarity on what I raised? So does that mean that we can't include... I mean, I'm very, very worried about the word dependent.
I think you want to clarify dependence. I think you
I
want to
do,
clarify
because
that.
I don't
You want to
want-
clarify to that specific family who are there.
Yes, the dependent must only be their children, but not their granny or their you know, we're so used to.
The living maid.
So we have a proposal and a second, and because this is a different recommendation to that proposed. Yeah.
And if this committee is minded to grant approval, whether temporary or permanent, I would like to have a condition imposed that prevents any kind of commercial activity or the storage of commercial material on the site. Which one?
Six.
I was skimming through it to look for it.
It's in there.
No vehicle. Oh, no commercial, including storage of material. It's there already.
I'm going to, so of course we have a difference here. I'm going to adjourn the meeting so that proposer can just come forward and just really clarify this, what we're talking about here. I think you've said 3 years, did you?
I suggested 3 years. Yeah.
So what? Who proposed it? Sorry, it was proposed by Lynn. What are you proposing? To be made. It's likely to be between 2 and 3, yeah? Okay. Okay. All right. So we adjourn for, I'm going to say 10 minutes. So to go and have a cup of tea and whatever, that'll be about 5 to 11. Thanks. And if Lynn, you could come and join us for a sec. Thanks. Have to finish the old tales of yesteryear. We'll restart when you're ready. We're on? Good. All right, thank you very much. We're recommencing the planning meeting, and we are, the development manager and/or Matthew are just going to read out the reasons for given for the decision to be voted on in a minute. Would you? You wrote them down.
Well, my understanding is it is a recommendation to grant plan permission for a temporary period of 3 years from the date of the decision, and subject to additional condition requiring details to be submitted for any replacement of the mobile home for express permission by the local planning authority. Just to clarify that the first reason is temporary. At the end of that permission, it will require a removal of all related operational development as well. It's removed from the site. It will be a standard temporary planning condition. Thank you.
So if permission wasn't granted beyond that point, the site would have to be returned to its original state. Okay, let's just make that really clear. Right, so it's proposed and seconded. They're the reasons given. Those in favour of that decision, please raise your hands. I think we have. Yeah. And those against? We have 2. So that motion is approved as spoken. Thank you very much. And thank you for the speakers who came today, particularly the Parish Council representative. The next application is the former Market Garden in Lower Waits Lane, and that's RR 2022/2069/P. And we have Matthew Worsley presenting that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a DASA allocated site in Fairlight for 16 dwellings. In September 2021, permission was granted at appeal for 16 houses, parking and a wildlife area to the north. The current application proposes to vary certain conditions to amend the site layout. The alterations would include enlarging the wildlife area in an eastward direction. The wildlife area is in the north part of the site in the centre, and it's coloured brown. It would move around 5 metres eastwards. A bin store would be moved to the southeast of the wildlife area. That was previously more within the wildlife area. The 2 dwellings to the east side, so the pair of semi-detached properties to the east side of the wildlife area, would be moved over, again around 5 metres to the east. This would have an impact on the parking spaces and the turning head at the east end of the site. There would be a reduction of 2 spaces from the scheme allowed at appeal, and that northern part of the turning head would narrow. In respect of bin and cycle storage, there seems to have been a little bit of confusion in what was approved at appeal and what is now approved. The scheme approved at appeal, there was a single bin store to the south of that wildlife area. I think an earlier iteration of the layout plan had shown a really long cycle store, separate bin stores to the south of the wildlife area, as well as a separate bin and cycle store at the west end of the site, but that was not considered by the inspector. It was not what was approved. What was approved was a single bin store to the south of the wildlife area. The bin store now proposed is moved slightly, and in fact it will be larger. Cycle stores for each house are secured by condition on the appeal decision. We previously approved cycle sheds by condition. If this is granted, we'll need an amendment to that condition, but it is taken care of. As explained in the report, the amendments would have little impact on the character and appearance of the locality. The site would become slightly more open and spacious in the middle to the northern part, with increasing the size of the wildlife area, but would become less so at the east end. But overall, it has little impact on the wider character of the village. Increasing the size of the wildlife area would be of benefit to the protected species and their habitat, and is the sole purpose of this application. While some site works have commenced, which members probably saw at the site visit, we've been informed this has not triggered the need to apply for a licence from Natural England. The developer has employed their own ecologists throughout the application process and development, who continue to advise them on ecological matters. The advice is that when work starts, before work starts on the pair of semis to the east of the wildlife area, that is when the licence would be required. We have consulted the county ecologist during this variation of condition application. They are happy with the ecological report and mitigation measures and the increased wildlife area, because that is the purpose of this, to provide better habitat protection. In terms of parking provision, the highway authority said that advised that what is proposed is one short of what's required under the county parking calculator. Since the report's been written, there have been further discussions with the applicant, and it's come to light that in their parking assessment prepared by Monsoon, they are actually proposing a greater amount of unallocated parking, which reduces the overall number of parking spaces required. So 28 spaces are proposed on site, 6 garages are proposed on top of it, which count as a third of a space. The need, I believe, if you had allocated spaces, was 30. The 32. Okay. This report that's been produced by the transport consultants, using more unallocated parking, the requirement drops to 27. So they're actually proposing one more than is required under the calculator. Within the transport statement, the East Sussex parking calculator extract has been produced. It's in there with the figures. In respect of the turning head, you will see on the layout plan, sort of see anyway, that there are tracking drawings on there, so showing a bin lorry could turn at the end on that turning head. The Highway Authority have been consulted on this. They are happy with this plan showing turning arrangements. I understand the parish council are going to speak today and have raised concerns about various issues. However, they have sent in the last week, they sent in additional comments, just in the event that permission is granted, that conditions are attached relating to bins and accessibility of bins, disabled parking, cycle storage, which I mentioned we have got a condition related to that, and also charging points, which I don't think have been included on the recommended conditions. So just to make you aware of that, and they may expand on those issues. In summary, officers believe the changes are minor in nature. They've been proposed with the intention of protecting protected species and their habitat, giving them more protection. Highways have been consulted and are, although not ideal, the parking arrangements, they raise no objection. Like I said, subsequent discussions with the applicant have shown that actually they are proposing more unallocated parking and actually would be proposing one more space than is required under the parking calculator. The living conditions of future occupiers would be similar to the scheme granted at appeal. And for these reasons, the recommendation is to grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. We have Councillor Horsley from Fairlight Parish Council. Thank you very much and welcome. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening to me. I will try and be brief and succinct, but as you see, there are some issues here. The development site is for housing is now smaller than previously thought. This is due to the efforts of the protected wildlife that live there, especially the ones that have a black and white stripe on their head, because I'm not allowed to say the B word. The protected wildlife have squeezed the development site, and the developers are now attempting to squeeze the infrastructure of the space. It is not to increase the habitat for the wildlife because they think it will be nice, it's because the wildlife habitat has expanded since the original thing. The wildlife space is not an amenity area. It will not be open to the residents. It will be fenced off and inevitably will just become overgrown and will not provide an open space. So although it's shown as an open space, it's not going to be, and it's not going to be accessible. So the developers have solved this conundrum by reducing the already barely adequate infrastructure, as we've already heard, rather than reducing the footprint of housing, i.e. by reducing the number of houses. This will make the site more crowded, more difficult to navigate, and will make refuse disposal more difficult. It will also cause parking on the adjacent roads, not on the site, which are not wide enough to accommodate this. Bins. The bin store's been moved and reduced on site on more than one occasion, as we've already heard. The size of the bin store indicates that the bins are now communal. This may necessitate a separate refuse lorry to empty them, as is the case on another site in Fairlight. The bins are at a distance to the houses that will be using them. The houses that will be using them are on the top left, and it is a considerable walk. The size and number of the bins needs to be large enough to accommodate all the rubbish generated by these households to prevent bags being left next to the bins, which may or may not be removed by the refuse men. Large communal bins are, I understand, 1,100 litres. 6 normal household bins would provide 1,440 litres. There's a discrepancy there. If large bins are installed, these will be difficult for frail or elderly or disabled residents, of which we have a considerable number already in Fairlight, due to the size and weight of the lids and the height of the bins. Also, there appears to be no provision for brown garden refuse bins in this store. So where do the householders dispose of this bin, this refuse? In the wildlife area? There's also no provision for accommodating more bins should future recycling be further diversified. Badgers are known to be curious and hungry and can also be very effective destroyers of things. A bin store next to a badger set would seem to me to be a temptation too far for hungry badgers. This will cause mayhem. The bin store was originally, on the original 2017 plan, opposite the terrace of houses it was going to serve, and it's been moved quite away from them. I think that's a problem. Bicycles. East Sussex wants bicycle storage for each dwelling, and originally there was a nice shed for it. Plans state secure cycle storage will be provided for each house, but nothing's shown in the plans or the paperwork to explain how they're going to do this. For example, the residents of a mid-terrace house with no front garden, where are they going to put their bikes? And we are encouraging people to use bikes. And as a bike user myself around the village, especially electric ones, they're very helpful. The hammerhead. The Hammerhead plans show that a large vehicle would have to do a multi-point turn, and if you look at the little blue lines, you can see how multi-point that is. This is a residential road with no pavements. This is going to be dangerous to pedestrians and children, and from experience elsewhere in the village, will cause damage to verges. Parking. In 2017, Highways stated that for this development, they were unable to object to the access to the site as it was private roads. And 2 of the 3 access roads, which are single track and have a poor road surface, that's the one on the left and the one across the bottom going right, are also private roads. And so I believe that limits the reliability of their report if they're not able to comment on parking and whatever on private roads. Highways assessment says parking is less than ideal. They quote the parking...
Are you nearly done, Councillor Horsley?
Yeah, I am. They quote the parking spaces, and we've discussed allocated or unallocated. It doesn't matter whether they're allocated or unallocated. If the cars are coming to the site, they need a parking space. It would also mean that the cars are going to overspill onto Smugglers Way, which is a residential road, and that will considerably alter the ambience of that road. We have problems in other places already with parking. In conclusion, the obvious solution to a reduced site size due to protected wildlife is to reduce the number of dwellings, not to crowd everything closer together on what's already a crowded site. If it's passed, I'd like the applications to be looked at. However, if the committee is minded to ask for a deferral, these points could be clarified before full permission is granted.
Thank you very much. I heard the word in conclusion, but...
Yeah, that's... Sorry.
Yeah, that old trick. Thank you. Thank you very much. You've raised quite a few issues. Councillors, questions for Councillor Horsley? Yes, Councillor Mayor.
Chairman, I think most of my questions would be directed in due course to the officer. But I would just like to thank you, Councillor Horsley, for your presentation. There's one question. Do you know the distance from this site to Wood Field, which is the public recreation area, approximately?
No, I don't, but I know it's uphill.
Would you accept from me that it's 446 metres?
I would accept. I would accept it is a good stiff walk up to Woodfield.
I think I've admonished Councillor Gordon once today for leading questions. I think I have to admonish you as well now.
Well, I hope the officer would confirm it as well.
It's not an issue for the application that stands today.
It is an amenity area in the village, and this site doesn't have an amenity area.
Right, questions, Councillor Prochak.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming along representing the parish's point of view and thoughts. The unadopted roads, you can hardly call them roads when we visited the site, they're lanes. There wouldn't be any room to actually, would there, to park on those particular...
That's another. Is this the leading question day? Councillor Prochak. Councillor Prochak. I know, but it's a leading question. I've admonished 2 councillors already.
I can confirm that they are lanes. They are single-track, unadopted roads with hedges down the sides, and those who've done the site visit will know they look very rural. There are no parking places except in front of other amenities, such as the Garden Club hut and Southern Waters storage tanks, anywhere on that plan, except on the little grey road coming down on the left lower edge.
I think your point is one that directly addresses one of the issues on this application, and I'm sure it will be discussed at length. I'm convinced of that. Was there another question for Councillor Horsley? Yes, Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm just concerned about the wildlife, as you so describe them as the furry ones with the black and white stripes. We know they tend to spread. Do you happen to know what area they cover in this plot?
Yeah, since you've asked me directly, they are in the brown area, and the underground habitation for these black and white striped features has expanded since the original application went in. Also, when the site was starting to be cleared, there was a further habitation on the lower border, which the ecologist has commented does not need to be fenced off because it is deep. But up to the point of the start of this development, the protected wildlife species were expanding in this area, and there's no reason to expect them to not continue to enjoy living in what's a lovely part of Fairlight.
Any other questions on that? We have had extensive training on the protected species, so I'm sure people will remember that. If no other questions, thank you very, very much. We very much appreciate your speaking today. And we have Chris Sampson, the agent, coming forward to speak as well. Chris, thank you very much. You probably have seen what happened, so just need to remember to turn your microphone on and off.
Good morning. I'm Chris Sampson from Campbell Williams, planning consultant, an agent for the application. Thanks for the opportunity to address the committee. It's nice to have up to 5 minutes, which is more than most that I attend. The officer report and presentation is all welcomed. The proposals, just in summary, are relatively narrow in scope. It's worth just remembering that obviously there is approval, which was through the appeal process, and that the proposals do not increase the unit numbers or the floor space of the approved scheme. There's no increase in traffic, therefore, associated with these proposals. These are relatively minor amendments. There are some changes, as we've heard, and are required to ensure that the 16 housing units that have been approved and are required indeed through the site allocation policy in the local plan, which requires 16 units to be delivered on the site. The enlargement of the wildlife area is necessary to limit the impact on protected species, as we've heard. This follows long-term monitoring by the project ecologist and advice given to the applicant. A licence will be obtained from Natural England prior to the works to the 2 plots in question. That's the 2 plots part of this amendment application commencing. At present time, the area involved with those 2 plots has been fenced off within the site so that it's outside of the working area at present. But there would be a licence applied for in the proper manner, which is a separate process outside of planning, and that would take place, if we get approval here, next year. Following the wildlife recommendations, it does inevitably mean a degree of compromise with regard to the provision of car parking, so that's recognised. However, the loss of 2 spaces means, depending on how the requirement is calculated, the parking provision is close to the recommended total in the East Sussex calculator. Depends whether you do it via an allocated methodology or partly unallocated, but whichever way you do it, it's not far away, and it's worth noting that the garages are actually 6 metres by 3 metres internally and are restricted by condition to prevent changes being made internally or externally. So that does mean the garaging, of which there are 6, only 2 of which of those are included as part of the allowance that is allowed by highways. But in reality, we've got large garages which are controlled closely, and so there's a greater likelihood that those would be used for vehicle parking than perhaps would be typical on many modern estates. Secure cycle parking is being provided for each house, and this is secured by condition 25. Adjusted scheme is going to be submitted because of the amendments proposed. And I've already gone over the Sussex points, so I'm just working through my notes. In response to the parish council, some of the points there will still be space for a large refuse vehicle to turn within the site. That's been tracked on the drawings. The bin storage details were already approved. The bin store location is broadly the same. It's been moved slightly, but it is secure within a brick building, so it's not going to be something that badgers will very easily be able to get into. And overall, I mean, the Highway Authority haven't objected, as we've seen. This is despite the best efforts of the Parish Council, who's written to them, which they're perfectly entitled to do, to ask that the County Council give it even closer scrutiny, which they have done, and they have held firm on their position. The planning inspector did accept that the site was in an appropriate location relative to walking distances to the local open spaces and so forth. So in that sense, the overall principle and the access arrangements to the site have clearly been accepted and are not open for discussion today. So the applicant would kindly request members' support. I'm happy to respond if there's any particular questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have some questions? Yes, Councillor Prochak.
Parish Council, Isabel Horsley mentioned EV charging points. Is that possible on the site?
Yeah, I have discussed that with the applicant ahead of today, in case that came up. I think the position is there isn't on the current approval any requirement under planning to deliver those, but if the committee was minded to, I don't think there would be any objection to that being added on an approval now. It is possible, it is feasible, I understand, and it's something that on the construction drawings, which obviously aren't part of the planning process, they are being looked at, and I think it is possible to deliver those if that would help things along.
That's really welcome to hear that, because they can't actually park outside their own homes, can they, at the moment, all of them?
There's a mixture of, on-plot and remote parking. I think we'd accept that, yeah.
Questions? Yes, Councillor Meir.
Yes, thank you. There was mention by the officer of disabled parking. There's nothing on the plan as yet, is there? What's the proposal?
That's right. I think all of the parking spaces are the usual size that are required. There aren't any specially adapted spaces within the approved scheme or the currently proposed one. Space is tight. It may be possible to look at including one within the site, but in the central area there may be some scope. I don't know if you can see on the plan, you've got the bin store and the area in front of it. There is a little bit of width potentially there that could be looked at through a slight adjustment. Potentially that could be done as a condition because it would be one space becoming a bit wider. But in the current proposals, no, there isn't any disabled parking.
We all realise a disabled parking place is wider than a normal parking place, so it's not likely to add to the number of parking places, more likely detract from them.
Looking at the layout on the proposed drawing, which I've got, which is 03 P6, on the area that what I'm saying is that on the northern side of the access road, you've got a run of parking spaces there, which do have some gaps between them. So what I'm saying is that it would be possible to adjust to make one slightly wider to meet the disabled without reducing any parking spaces. But that's not, as far as I'm aware, there isn't a policy requirement to provide that. It certainly wasn't something within the approved drawings.
Thank you. So no present proposal for electric charging points for cars. I would say, which I think councillors here would probably like to see, but when there are charging points, then of course that restricts the use of the parking place, doesn't it? And probably increases the amount of time cars are parked.
I think we did cover the electric charging point from the previous question, I think. So there was an indication that there wouldn't be an objection to a condition if that was something the committee were minded to request. I don't think that would be something that would be unpalatable. I think it's something that clearly there's a move in that direction anyway. On the question about the occupancy levels of parking spaces that may have a charger, I think in this instance it wouldn't be such that you would have to have an EV to park in certain spaces. I think it would be that there would be chargers for each space, and then there would be a management system of some sort, probably a swipe card or something, when you're starting charging and deal with it in that manner. It wouldn't prohibit others using the spaces.
Councillor Norton. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, yes, Chair, if I may. Yes, and we heard about cycle parking being conditioned. I can't see where you would put the cycle parking on that plan.
On the layout plan that's proposed, there are sort of rear gardens. There's detached cycle stores indicated on there. I believe that the condition on cycle parking was previously discharged, I understand, under the current, the extant approval. So on the appeal scheme, in other words, that was approved, the condition on cycle parking was discharged, and it involves parking within the rear cycle parking within the rear gardens.
So we can't go any further with that, except to say that there's no access to the rear gardens of the terrace. I don't know how anyone could park there.
I think there's one plot. There's on the ends, obviously, you can get through. There's a couple of plots. I think it's 4 and 5. Oh no, sorry, they're odd numbers. 7 and 9 on my plan. So the third and the fourth unit along on the terrace, in other words. I understand gates are being put in. Just check with my... Yeah, on those two plots, there are going to be rear garden gates, so you can actually get a bike out. So there is just one plot which is more tricky, which is the third one along. But again, that's not changed from the previous situation.
If I could just help out on that one. The cycle condition has been discharged already.
That's all I have, Chair.
Councillor Norton, yeah?
Could I ask you about gardens? It's my opinion is that this is a rather congested site, and I think the gardens are going to be very important when it comes to talking about people's quality of life. And I wondered if they look to me very pokey, some of the on the location plan, and I wondered whether they meet the minimum recommended requirements for garden sizes.
This was quite a feature in the appeal decision. So there was a clarification on interpretation of the policy, the DHG7 policy on garden sizes in the appeal decision, which did indicate that a degree of flexibility should be permitted. And again, the units perhaps on this layout with the smallest gardens are the terraced units, and we're not changing those as part of this application. The only change, I think, as part of this amendment, which has been referred to in the officer report, is the unit in the northeastern corner of the site. Does have a slightly reduced garden, but it is one of the larger plots on the site, and that remains the case. So it's still got quite a large garden actually. So yeah, there is variation on garden sizes. That's been dealt with under the appeal approval, and the only change is in that top right corner, which is one of the larger plots. So that's...
Unfortunately, that's been done. The ones with the really small gardens are not being affected by this proposed change. So that's unfortunately not a place to go. I mean, that was part of the issue that the members had the first time around. I think it was somewhat of a surprise the inspector took that decision. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, hello. What mitigation measures will prevent the expansion of the wildlife site?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, there will be some fencing, including underground fencing, to prevent outward migration, if you want to call it that, into the development plot from the wildlife area. So that's why, because of the changes that have occurred over time with the protected species, partly because of, dare I say it, the timescales of getting through the planning process. It has meant that there's been a need to take on board through the monitoring to amend the wildlife areas we've heard. So again, it is a question of balancing competing demands as ever. So it's a question of balancing the wildlife and the other matters, as we've seen. Sorry, I'll move the microphone a bit closer. Sorry, can you just repeat the question again? Yeah.
Basically, it's the mitigation measures. And then you follow that by talking about underground fencing. Can you just explain how that works?
Yeah, so it's badger protection fencing in essence to prevent digging under the ground into the gardens. So that would be placed at a suitable location within the wildlife area. And part of the reason for this is to basically give the protected species more room, within the wildlife area. So that's why that's been enlarged. As I say, at the moment, those plots that are affected by the wildlife on site have been, so the 2 plots that we're moving have been fenced off to make sure there's been no incursion or interference with those. So specialist fencing basically is the main thing. That's in terms of protection. That would be detailed as part of a licensing application to Natural England.
I don't think it's. I think we've had this very long discussion on a previous application. Unfortunately, it's not one. The decision to increase the wildlife area and the licence are the things that will control that, regardless of how we feel about that. I mean, the issue here is, it's been through that check. The issue here is one of the changes to the parking, turning, etc., and other ancillary bits around that. Other questions for? Yes, Councillor Langlands.
Have you at any point thought about whether you could reduce the number of houses? Have you ever thought about that as making the life of the people who are going to live there, as well as the wildlife, a nice area to live and a manageable area to live? I mean, I guess it's incumbent upon you to think about that and bring that to us. And I know that I've seen other planning applications where they've cut 4 beds into 2, but could you think about cutting a semi into a single? I mean, have you ever considered that to make this work better? Because I read the reports, and it's all through the reports, it says, not ideal, but. Well, not ideal sort of rather upsets me a tad in the terms of the lifestyle of the people that you're actually building these properties for. So I just put that ball in your court and see how you feel about it.
We've talked about competing demands. I mean, the site is allocated in the local plan for 16 units. It needs to be assessed on whether it's acceptable in planning terms to accommodate 16 units, and that's a judgment obviously you'll have to make. But in essence, obviously we've got to balance the different considerations, taking care of the wildlife whilst making best use of the land. It is a site that's within a village location and is in the local plan, so there's an importance to make efficient use of it, so to help reduce pressure on speculative applications outside of existing settlements. So unless there was a particularly good reason to reduce the numbers, it's not something that that would be considered. The judgment here is that 16 units can be accommodated within the site in an acceptable manner. I think the Highway Authority have used the not ideal, but nevertheless they've been probed closely, and the head of the relevant department has responded and reaffirmed that's their view. So, I think if it was subject to any external scrutiny, that's something that would be very much in the mind of any decision maker that was looking at it from outside.
Were there any other? Yes, Councillor Prochak.
Sort of leading on from what Councillor Langland said, the highways that said that they would have preferred the garages, because we all know what garages are used for, not cars, and they would have preferred that you had them as carports. And I know that would actually suggest that we defer for you to do that, but what are your thoughts on that?
That's something I would have to, I think, consider with the applicant. I would point out that on the conditions, there's a condition. I think it's condition 26 from memory on the original approval, which does restrict changes to the outside and the inside of the building and prohibits any habitable type use of the garages. So whilst that's, you can't make people use garages, I recognise that. You can't force them to use them to park cars. But what you can do is create the conditions that makes it more likely. So sometimes in the past, on, say 10 plus years ago, a lot of garages were built that were too small for modern cars. Cars have got bigger. We all recognise that. These ones they all meet the 6 by 3 metres internal standard, which is, pretty generous when you compare to an outside parking space, which is 2.5. So they're an extra half metre to make it possible and not a strain to get in and out of the car when you're in there. So I think all we can do is create the conditions to make them more likely to be used. But what I would say as well is in the highway response, they don't take account of the fact there are 6 garages. They only allow for 2 of the 6 towards the calculation, but in reality, we have got 6 garages. So, if we're providing the conditions that make it easier to use those practically, then that's something on the positive, I would say, line of when you're comparing to the minimum sort of standards.
Just on that point, okay, I'll come to you, Jaspreet, in a second. Just on that point of parking, I think that the point that Councillor Prochak and others have sort of made is that this is an application which has not been ideal in terms of coming down from, it's been reduced and reduced and reduced in terms of what it delivers in the broader sense. And this is not a criticism of yourself, it's a fact, affordable housing, it goes to, reduced car parking because of the constraints you had to face on the site. And a garage, it's one thing to remove permitted development rights, say to use it for a habitable space, but people have a habit of also filling them up with all their things and therefore making them unusable for parking. And there is no parking on the tracks. They're tracks, they're not even lanes outside. And so that forces people up the road. And I think the point that Councillor Prochak was making, that if they weren't garages, they were car parking spaces for those houses, then people couldn't turn them into parking, turn them into storage sheds, and therefore would help alleviate that problem. But that's not a decision that we can make against this plan. It's only something that you could do if you agreed to us deferring it, if that was one way forward to help a situation which is clearly, in highways terms, not ideal. And this is because it's a private, unadopted road. It doesn't even have footways, which, if you look at everything that talks about sustainable development, one of the things they look at is footways. So and that can't be controlled in this environment because it is unadopted. So there's lots of things which are very uncomfortable, and I think that's what the members are asking you questions about here, and seeking alternatives, which really are in your gift, but not in the gift of the decision today. You would have to be saying, we are happy to go away and do those things, or look at them very seriously for the committee to think about a deferral to allow you to do that if they were confident that you're going to come back with some of those compromises. Because clearly, it's the issues, the ecological issues are dealt with, and it is trying to make it's trying to make a development more acceptable to the local community. I think that's the key here. I think I'll probably summarise that for you. So, do you have a response to that? I mean, I know we have to move on, but I think getting your feedback on that would really help the committee's deliberations.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult without discussing it with the applicant to provide an instant response.
I appreciate that too. I've put you in a very difficult position.
And it would, if it were possible to do that, then it would require some changes to the submitted plans and so forth. So, because the garaging, just looking at the layout plan, is within the buildings of the dwellings. It's not separate, detached garaging that's proposed. So it would mean changing the house type drawings and so on. I mean, I think I can't give an easy answer to that immediately unless it was possible to have a short adjournment to discuss that with the applicant. But which is something that then I could discuss it with them, provide a further response.
Thank you for that. If you just hold that thought for a moment. Jaspreet wants to make a comment. Jaspreet.
So thank you, Chair. I just wanted to address the committee quickly about the ability to control how the garages may or may not be used. I mean, I think it's been touched on, but it's worth bearing this in mind again. The use of a building within the curtilage of a dwelling house for purposes incidental to the dwelling house is not considered to be development within the meaning of the Town and Country Planning Acts. The effect of that is that there is no way to control how someone uses their garage through condition or otherwise. In terms of the other points you've made, I mean, obviously it's worth reminding the committee you have to deal with the application that's in front of you today, but I think you've made the points quite clearly on that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jaspreet. So I'm just going to ask Councillor Byrne, because he's got a question of you, and I think it's worth having that short adjournment to allow the applicant to have that conversation in the circumstance, if that's what you would like. Is that? I mean, you raised the issue, Councillor. Yeah, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. Given that this was allowed on appeal, the design of the houses has not changed, has it? So the garage space, the only thing that happens is you've moved two of the houses to the east and you've lost 2 parking spaces, and as a result, a limited turning space at the bottom, a more limited space at the bottom. Is that correct?
Yes, that's it. We've moved the 2 plots along, and that's resulted in essentially two parking spaces being omitted. So everything else in terms of floor space, house type design, height of buildings and so forth is the same. Yeah.
And if I understand correctly, the turning space has been monitored again and has been found acceptable to refuse vehicles and the like?
Yes, it's been tracked, I think, using the largest bin vehicle, the mythological extra large bin lorry that I don't believe is actually the one that's used. So it's a worst case scenario on the bin lorry tracking, and highways have looked at that and are satisfied with it. I think on the original design it was a very large sort of, I think they called it the courtyard on the drawings, didn't they? And so it was oversized to start with, which it is still on the amendment. It's still oversized on the southern part of the layout, but it still works basically. It's been looked at closely with highways.
The bin storage that you've moved, the terrace houses would have in the first on the development that was allowed on appeal, that the situation was still the same. They would have to go from where they were to where the bins were, even though they've been moved slightly. So we're really looking at turning circle, moving houses and bins. That's all we're really looking at. Not garage size or design of house, or am I right?
In terms of the changes, yes, that's right. I think the only thing where the garages was coming into the discussion was because we've lost the 2 parking spaces. It's then a question of, I suppose, well, is the overall parking provision in the round acceptable? Part of what I was saying is, whilst I accept you can't force people to use garages for parking, what you can do is make the preconditions to then being able to do so conveniently as good as possible. And I think that's what we've tried to do.
So all we've done is lose 2 parking spaces. We're trying to discuss now whether that, just the 2 parking spaces, would actually make life intolerable for the people on the unmade-up roads on the approaches.
It would appear so, yeah.
Okay,
thank you.
I've got 2 more. Councillor Langens first. And then.
Thank you. Can I just say that I'm actually delighted. It doesn't often happen that you've actually said that you would consider a short adjournment to go away and have a chat with the applicant, because I think looking at this site today, I have to say I've stepped back and thought it's all getting a little bit tight and a little bit squashed, and there is a community there and a wider community, and we want to make it work. We always, as a planning committee, want to make it work, but we need you to help us make that work. And I would like to think that what comes out of today is a short adjournment for you to go away, see what you can do to improve those parking conditions and living conditions, and we say, yes, go ahead, because I think that would be really beneficial to everyone.
Councillor Prosh.
Question really perhaps for you, because I wanted to bring up issues about the turning head, but I'm not sure whether it's for officers or...
For the officers, I think. Yeah. Question is, are you happy as a committee to have a short adjournment to let the applicant have a discussion and come back? Well,
I just add then, before we take that, is that, I mean, it's the garden waste bins, it's the garages, it's the bike store, it's EV charging, disabled parking. Yes, it is. And it's been suggested and accepted. What I wanted to point out was that they asked the county to do a desk job on this turning head. Time and time again, and with my hat on as Waste and Recycling Cabinet member, I know that if the bin lorry comes down and has to make a 6 point... it's just, that is a desktop calculation
it's a question
that is adequate. So I know what they will do is they will actually reverse.
That's it. It's still a question time for the applicant.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's
well,
all right.
I did ask you if I
should. I know. Well, I did. Yes, you're fair to ask that, but we should keep that. I think the question now is: does anyone want to propose just an adjournment? I'll do that as a vote to allow the applicant to have a discussion about that, or not. So, who would you're going to propose that? Yes. Is anyone? Yeah?
Chairman, can you articulate adjournment? Do you mean physically now?
Yes, physically now.
Or do we carry on with another application?
No, we'll adjourn for... No, just an adjournment for 5 minutes for the applicant to have a short discussion with his with the developer to ask him if he would consider those changes to the garages so they are used for car parking as opposed to potentially storage, and let him come back. I mean, I'm more than happy to do that. If there's a whole lot of issues that Councillor Prochak raised, and he may want to combine that in an update of this application we've got here, or he may not. So you've got that choice. But I think giving the applicant a chance to do that could improve. If it's about improving a development, then why wouldn't you do it? A quick one, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd hate us to go to appeal and lose again.
Is this a question?
For clarification, if we go to an amendment, are we still talking about 16 houses?
No. Is this a question for the applicant?
No, it isn't.
Okay,
it was relevant to your reasons for adjournment.
So is anyone... Councillor Langlands has put forward a proposal. Is anyone seconding the proposal? That's a second. So the proposal is to allow for an adjournment for 5 minutes for the agent to speak to the applicant and come back after that, and we can have it. It's a little unusual procedure, but we're going to do that. So who would like to support that proposal? That's, okay. How many did you count there? Okay, are those against that? Is anyone against that proposal? There's a few against it, so you can have 10 minutes. So, okay. So do you mind doing that? And let's hope you can get your way through. You've got 10 minutes, so that's going to be to 12:05. I think it's the right. Chris, yeah? Did you have an opportunity to speak with your...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've had an opportunity to speak with the applicant, so I can feed back on the issue about the garaging, if that's okay, with your permission. Yeah. So on the approved layout, what we have is there's actually 6 plots that have garaging at present. including, if you look on the right-hand end of the site layout, the corner units. The numbers are quite small, but I think, is it plot 12? My eyesight's failing me on that, the bottom right and the top right plot, basically. So the northeastern plot, so the one right at the top right, yeah, and then the bottom right on that plan, are the two detached units that have garaging. So what we'd suggest as a compromise, and within this suggestion could be conditioned if the committee were minded to accept it on this basis, which I know is another question altogether. What we would like to suggest is that those two units change from having garaging with standard garage doors to a gated arrangement, which is a 3/4 height gate within the opening on the planning drawings, so that it's not, so it becomes more of a car barn rather than a sealed garage, if that makes sense. Because I think one of the things that was talked about was storage tends to happen when you've got a secure room that, you know, is weather tight, whereas if you had a 3/4 high gate, it means it's less likely to be used for storage because it's not going to be totally weatherproof, and you know, and in theory, someone could climb over the gate as well if they wanted to. What we would suggest is, as a compromise, is on the two units at the end of the site where the parking spaces have been taken out, because the two parking spaces came out from the location which is next to that top right plot, that those two units become sort of a car barn arrangement, which would simply be a condition detail. It wouldn't change the external walls or dimensions, or because they're 3 metre wide internally, so they're usable anyway, and that could be a condition detail under this amendment approval if that was something members were happy with. But that would be on the basis that an approval was secured today. We wouldn't want to wait another month or however long it takes to get back to planning committee just to resolve that point of detail, which I think could easily be conditioned, just like the cycle parking is conditioned.
Thank you. Sorry. That's for the two garages on the top right-hand corner. Is that correct? These two right corners. Can you help?
Is it the right-hand side? Yeah, I mean on the cursor here. You've got them over here.
Can you see the cursor on the screen?
Yeah. Is it those two on the right, the large?
Or else Val's get up and put.
Only those two? Yeah.
That's the two spaces, all right. Okay. Thank you very much for coming forward, and that's a rather long Q&A session. Open to the floor, really. I mean, you've heard quite a lot. You may have heard enough to even propose it. Go on, Councillor Madeley.
Thank you, Chairman. Another small clarification. You're talking about something which is a sort of 3/4 barn door or barn type door. What would be, could one have a condition on that they would never removed and a full garage door built in its place?
You could say retained thereafter as part of the wording.
Yes, Sir Councillor Ganley.
Move approval, Chairman.
Proposal seconded by Councillor Gordon. So, were there any other? There were a number of conditions proposed or suggested by the parish council. Are any of those conditions that you want to read out that people might want to consider? Members might want to consider.
Sorry about that. Okay. These are comments from the Parish Council. In the event that we are minded to approve the application. So they're looking for measures to restrict on-street parking to reduce the risk of restricting access for larger vehicles, refuse and emergency, and delivery vehicles. Details of the size of bins. Are they going to be easy to open for the elderly? Collection. Also, that a tap is installed so the bin area can be cleaned. I would comment we've already got a condition to do with bin arrangements, for which we've already approved details under condition. Garden refuse. Provision is made for the terraced houses to have access to garden waste bins to prevent dumping of garden refuse in the wildlife area. Again, that would be covered by the existing condition. Cycle storage, details of cycle stores. Again, we've got an existing condition. And then the disabled parking, which was mentioned earlier, and electric car charging points.
So of those, has the bin condition already been discharged? Because they're asking for a change in the bin position here. What does that mean?
Details of bins were approved by condition. If we approve this, the store to the south of the wildlife area would be approved. And then I would say the pair of semis, their arrangements would need reapproving because they've effectively changed position.
Well, also all the bins would need reapproving in terms of discharge because you're moving.
Well, no, because the rest of the houses are staying in their approved positions, and we had a bin plan.
But the bin plan's changed. It's moved.
This may not even be a material change.
I don't know. What's part of the application?
Yeah, but the plans already cover that, don't they? The changes in the plans, they already cover that. The details of the refuse storage has been discharged. Which one is it?
Well, we've already approved, discharged it. They may need a tweak because of moving these two houses.
Can you still put a tap in the area so it can be washed out? No, we can't guarantee that it's going to be free of traffic either. That's beyond that, and that's unenforceable.
Maybe it's just a All right, okay, so the bin situation has been discharged. The tap situation has been informative at the end because it can't be conditioned. The disabled parking, which was discussed earlier.
I mean, it's not part of the proposal as it stands. It would require an amendment to the layout plan.
Some of these could be non-material, and then there could be a non-material amendment at their discretion they can submit.
Okay. As an informative, we'll ask them to submit a non-material amendment.
No, you can't do that. That's not informative.
Okay. The disabled, we can't condition the disabled parking by the sound of it. That would have to come forward as an amendment. Yes, Councillor.
I just wanted to ask a question about, there was talk of measures to prevent parking in front of the terrace. That's paragraph 6.1.3. I'm trying to envisage what measures could be taken. Obviously, yellow lines are out of the
I think the problem is that none of that's enforceable, really, isn't it? You know, that's the problem.
It's not just not enforceable; it's impractical. There seems to be no means of doing it.
So I think we have it there, and the electric charging points was the other one. Yeah.
Or it could be another non-material amendment.
question to the applicant, to Chris. Are you prepared to come forward with two non-material amendments, which are for disabled parking and for EV points? Can you make that on behalf of your applicant? Because you sort of committed to it earlier.
The first one was EV, and then the first one that you said disabled car parking.
These are non-material amendments, which ultimately it would be done on trust that you would be coming forward with those.
I think the EV one is probably the easier of the two to achieve, because I think there are already on the drawing in very small print, if we have to zoom in, I think there are some points indicated. I'm just looking at next to the brown area. So in that sense, there's already an indication, so that could be possibly conditioned to be delivered as per the submitted plans. Yes, I think they're very small black dots.
It's showing the EV charging points. All right. I think we might. Will you endeavour to look for the disabled car parking? I know it's on trust entirely.
We can certainly look at that. I think the area to look at would be that area, that bit where next to the wildlife area, just widening one of the spaces if we can, and shuffling things along if we could do. Would that be a non-material amendment outside of this?
It would be a non-material amendment outside of this.
Yeah, we'll consider that.
Would make you more of a friend of the community. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Although I'm sure you are a friend of the community now.
Do our best.
All right. On that basis, I'm going to ask for a vote. The votes for approval with those various comments. Can I see a show of hands? Those for. And those against? Those abstaining? 1. 13 to 1, that is approved on that basis. Thank you very much for a little slightly unusual session, but hopefully we achieve something. The next, yes.
A point of information. When we have given permission for a site with new dwellings, how do we then let our department that collects the rubbish know? Because I can see this particular application being one that is refused for collection and therefore won't have a waste collection.
The answer is, I'm sure there are processes within the council which links up new developments with waste. Go on.
Naming and numbering would be one thing.
Yeah, but I mean, during the course of a planning application, we consult waste services, and they look at bin collection and things like that. Highways will also look at that. So if a site isn't particularly suitable, they'll say collection will have to be by a smaller vehicle, because they do have small collection vehicles, don't they, for tight spots. So we consult on it during an application. Back in 2017, I wasn't the officer, so I don't know for this particular one, but.
And I think that if the highways have said a truck can move in there, it would be very hard for them to refuse to do that, I would imagine. Yeah. All right, we're going on to Leaf Farm, which is RR2022/736/P. And you're doing this one, Matt. So, the Matt Worsley show today. You can bring back a minute, I'll have the officers report first, go on.
Okay, so this application relates to a site located in the countryside, an AONB. Permission is sought to erect a single-storey holiday-let building with associated access, car park and landscaping. We move on to the next slide. On the site plan, you'll be able to see the red line, which is the access track, and then a small red rectangle at the end, which is the location of the holiday let. The land to the west is ancient woodland. The siting of this holiday let is just 3-4 metres from the woodland. Should we move on to the next channel? The aerial photography shows the ancient woodland to the west. I believe there's been some coppicing in recent times, and that's probably to the south. There's potentially been more to the north, but it remains ancient woodland can be coppiced. It regrows. It's part of the management process. Next slide. The proposal is single storey. It's quite a contemporary design with flat roof. I think it's got charred wood cladding proposed and a zinc roof, aluminium windows. Next slide, please. Internally, to the south, you've got an open plan living area. To the north, you've got 2 bedrooms, bathrooms. This is a holiday let scheme, and we have got local and national policies that are supportive of tourism uses in the countryside. However, this site is very isolated. It doesn't relate to an existing farm setup. It is very much by itself in an undeveloped field. The building is around 120 square metres in footprint, which is larger than some houses. Being an undeveloped field, this proposal would, we believe as officers, have a domesticating impact on the countryside and AONB and be intrusive upon it, including the dark night sky with light spill from the windows and anything externally. As mentioned earlier, the building is within only 3-4 metres of the ancient woodlands. Standing advice from Natural England and the Forestry Commission says at least 15 metres buffer should be given to woodland. The application is accompanied by a tree report. This includes diagrams within it clearly showing a 15-metre buffer and the building entirely within the buffer zone. National policy says if it's within 15 metres or potential there is harm or loss to irreplaceable habitats, which an ancient woodland is, we are to refuse permission. We also haven't had any ecological surveys looking at protected species. So I appreciate we've had a tree survey, but we haven't looked at protected species. So we don't know what's present, potentially present, or what impact it would have on them. Due to the isolated nature of the site, there are concerns about the sustainability of location. Visitors would be heavily reliant on car, which is, as we all know, the least sustainable form of transport. In addition to the concerns already mentioned, there's inadequate visibility at the access. Next slide, please. Next. Yep. Shown in these 2 photos. We have consulted the Highway Authority and they raised an objection for this reason. For the reasons explained in this presentation and in the report, the recommendation is to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Yes, we have Ben Reeve speaking for the applicant, so thank you very much. You've probably got the hang of what to do by now from watching, so in your own time.
Good afternoon. could I begin by apologising for the mix-up with your first site visit and for any inconveniences caused. This project wasn't originally down to me, but due to circumstances, I have stepped in to have a go at it. And listening to you and reading already, I can see that there are a number of holes in the application, which I would hope we may be able to address, possibly at a later date. However, I am here, so I would like to add some context to myself and to the project. I am the 5th generation of my family to become custodian of the land at Lee Farm. I have been farming here since 2010, originally with my father, who sadly passed away in 2017, now farm alone, supported by my wife. We are a young family trying to make a go of it in a particularly challenging time for the industry. The margins in agriculture have become increasingly tight as the cost of inputs have risen dramatically in the last 2 years. Alongside this, the CAP reform post-Brexit has presented a fall in income which may or may not receive in a different form at a later date. At present, there is very little security as to where and when these payments may be available to us. I feel that it is essential we look to diversify to protect my business and ultimately my family in order to combat the uncertainties we're seeing within the industry at the moment. Both my wife and I have a strong interest in the environment and finding ways our business can run harmoniously alongside nature, whilst also providing a sustainable income. We feel the proposed project fits into the bracket for a number of reasons. The building has been designed to be temporary, sitting on raised pads above the ground, therefore having very low impact and being fully removable and reversible in the future. The building has been designed using sustainable and locally sourced timber, which will naturally weather and blend into the woodland backdrop, making it very visible in the landscape. The building would be highly insulated using triple glazing requiring minimal heating and energy input. The building would be powered by solar and battery storage to reduce any negative effects on both the environment and the landscape. Sewage would be dealt with by using a portable tank system, easily removed and taken back to the farmyard via the field and emptied into a bulk tank to be removed by a licensed operator. We are open to smart glazing and limitations on external lighting to further reduce the impact on the AONB, which could be secured by planning condition. The proposed project is located in the same field parcel as an existing Sussex Lund project in the form of a new hedge/wildlife corridor. We are looking to add dew ponds for newts, so nectar pollen mixes for bees, butterflies and other insects, alongside some bird mixes, to provide winter feed for farmland birds, which have a significant fall in their population over the last 30 years. Sussex Lund is open for applications from organisations, groups and individuals with projects that make practical and tangible green improvements to the High Weald AONB and can inspire wider change. With a particular emphasis on allowing public access to these projects, we feel our proposed building application would be highly beneficial to both the members of the public who will be staying with us and the ethos behind the projects. Robert, as a district, has a shortfall on holiday accommodation. We feel our project will provide additional accommodation to the area, which will help to support nearby existing tourism areas such as Tillingham Wines, Apple Barn Wedding Venue and Rye, with its variety of tourist attractions. All of these are easily accessible directly from the site via the footpath or the country lane at the top of the access track. We currently provide work for 3 self-employed members of the local community. If we were to be successful in our application, we would look to add further members to the team, as well as providing short-term job opportunities during the build process. The building itself is a temporary structure designed to be fully reversible in the future. We would also like to emphasise the proposed access is an existing access. It is an existing and established access, which will see extremely low use.
I'll ask you to round up now, please.
Last paragraph. Finally, we see our proposal as a unique opportunity for us to share our beautiful corner of the high-wheeled AONB with members of the public who might not ordinarily have the opportunities to do so. As I already mentioned, farming as an industry is becoming more and more difficult to make a living from in an economic environment which is dominated by large national or even multinational companies. We must protect our communities as life around us evolves. We must move with the times and adapt in order to sustain what we have. The proposal would have economic, social and environmental benefits in supporting tourism within the area, which we see as being fully supported in planning policy.
Thank you very much, Ben. Do we have some questions for the applicant? Yes, Councillor Ganley.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. Please be assured that I fully support the farming community because I know you're going through a tough time at the moment. I wanted to know if you had, or the applicant had sought pre-application advice before submitting the application.
As far as I'm aware, the only advice we've had is by the architect, I think. Unfortunately, I can't really add much more to that.
No.
It would appear not.
That's my impression.
Yeah.
Frankly, yes. Rachel. Oh, thank you.
Other questions? Other questions? Sorry, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. The field in which you're proposing to put this holiday let, off the top of your head, what percentage of your land is that field?
So that field's 10 acres, and the land that I own and farm at home is there's about 180 acres in total.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, and I echo what Councillor Ganley says. I am disappointed that you didn't take pre-app advice. I think maybe we wouldn't be here today, I don't know. And it's something we need to make sure that more people are aware of, and your agent perhaps should advise you. That's a separate issue. In terms of, and again, it's not to do with this, it's a decision, would you be able to put this or some alternative accommodation on your land? Have you already looked at extending the farmhouse or something, or are you prevented for doing that? I don't
think we're prevented. I think for me it's just a question of it being sustainable. I'm aware that projects similar to this, so temporary accommodation, shepherd's huts, those kind of things. I'm aware that market is potentially becoming saturated. And what we wanted to do was provide something a little bit different, something that is sort of long-term, more sustainable for everyone, for ourselves, obviously, as an investment.
So it's temporary in terms of its structure rather than the amount of time that it's going to be on the land?
I believe, again, I'm not very well read on this, I believe it is temporary in that it can be removed at any point.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you do own quite a large amount of land. I just wondered whether you had considered siting this holiday let in a less dominating position, where it would not be seen from a long way away, frankly.
Yes. I think the idea with this, I think it was the access which sold it. So the only advice, like I said, I'm aware that we took was from the architect, who I would, looking at it now, perhaps wasn't the person to be taking advice from. We did promote a couple of alternative sites, but it was decided amongst us that perhaps they were a little bit too remote, and this offered, with the access, the most practical site.
Can I just comment on that we did walk down the pathway to the site, and it didn't. I know it was very muddy and it was wet, but it didn't seem to me to be a terribly accessible route. It's going to require an awful lot of hard work to make that into a driveway.
Yeah. I mean, currently it's a forest track. I honestly think that could be done in 2 days max. All you have to do is just pull the edges up, so you've got to drain each side. It's clay, so it will go down very, very tight. And it would be minimal traffic. I believe the car park is meant to be at the top anyway. And you would just need a very, very small amount of stone on some to ram, and it wouldn't be a big project.
Councillor Curtis, did you want to speak?
thank you for your presentation. Following on from my colleagues who pinched my question, actually, about the access to the site. We walked down there. It's a long way. Would it be fair to say that that would be quite an arduous task for somebody? It's quite a big, so I guess a family would be staying there. If they're parking at the top, and then you'd be an awful lot of baggage and provisions over a long period. That's my first question about access to it. Following on from that, what are your thoughts about developing the actual driveway down to it? I mean, you've just said that you would, you can cut the sides back and etc. But in any adverse weather, which we experienced the other day, and I had to clean my shoes because of it. There was a long trek down there, so I just wondered what your comments were on that.
Well, again, I believe the kind of demographic of the population we would be targeting, they would embrace a journey like this. This is what we believe people are looking for. They're looking for something a little bit different. They're looking to be involved with nature and experience something that most people can't experience. So people who stay there would be pre-warned that it's not a question of convenience of driving to your doorstep and getting out, because that could be done in a million places in this country. So they would be aware, and that's our aim. That's what we're aiming for, something different, something a bit more rural and just different, immersed in nature. And then the track. I mean, without showing you, it really is a very, very quick fix. If you just pull, so you drop the edges, and water obviously it runs with gravity, doesn't it? And then you pull that up, so the track would be raised 2 to 3 feet, and then you put a bit of stone on top, and then arched or hollowed or the opposite. So I mean, the weather would run off very quickly. So in theory, it would be easily solved.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. Thank you. You've obviously inherited this application, recognise that there's, from what you said, some issues, and I'm sure you'll hear some discussion on that in a minute. So.
Can I ask a question, or is that not a thing?
No, it's not a thing, no, sorry.
That's all right.
As much as I'd like to say yes, it's not. So thank you very much. If you'd sort of like to take a seat and well, firstly, are there any questions for the officers, specific technical questions, or did you just want to have a discussion on it? Please, anyone would like to make any commentary on this? Anyone? Yes, Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chair. My question just now about the trackway, how does that fare on planning? Because obviously, by creating, initially you're not doing much by dropping the sides off, because that would be a natural drain away. But then the applicant spoke of surfacing it with something. Is that a planning issue, or is that it doesn't come into it?
I mean, I believe it's an unmade track at the moment, so making it up would require permission. But I believe this proposal, I mean, it's within the red line, so it could be covered. The details of that, if we haven't got it already.
Questions? Yeah. Councillor Projak.
Just say that I'm full of sympathy with the complexity of the situation that farmers find themselves in at the moment, without any sure way forward post-Brexit, and it really is quite a challenge for them. And we appreciate on this council the need for diversification, for tourism, and for actually promoting, as the applicant has said, promoting a different lifestyle to share our amazing countryside. But I'm afraid there are so many issues against this particular application that I'm going to have to move the refusal.
Okay, we have a motion to refuse. Does anyone want to second that? Okay.
I will. I totally agree with what Councillor Projak said.
Okay, so we have a seconder for that. Does anyone want to make any commentary, any further commentary? I think Councillor Projak's probably summarised it pretty well. Yeah, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd just like to say I have a little sympathy with the gentleman, but he really needs to take some planning advice, and I think that'll help an awful lot. Thank you.
You have an architect who's competent at finding that advice. You know, they're a well-known architect, and I think that's the case. So I think it's fair to say that the committee and the authority are very supportive of diversification, holiday lets, all of that on in farms, and I'm sure on your farm, because we actually did drive down towards your farm. The driver took the track to your farm, and you've got quite a conglomeration of buildings there, and there may be another location if you take advice that would work to help you achieve that diversification. So I think they're the things to look at. So we have a proposer and a seconder. Yes, Councillor Ganley, before we go to that.
Can I just ask, Chairman, if it is refused and a second application is made, that can be done without charge? Is that correct?
The free go only apply. There are certain rules for it, so it has to be the same site area, same proposal, same applicant, I believe. Yeah, same red line. So I think officer advice is this isn't a suitable location, so not acceptable in principle. So we'd be looking at a new application. But I think, as the chair has recommended, we would advise pre-app advice, and you come in and look at different locations, and we quite often like sites near to other buildings, so they relate to a group of farm buildings, for example, and accessibility is shared. But they're things we can do through the pre-app process, and we've got information on the website as well.
Okay. The alternative, of course, would be to withdraw the application. Okay, just an idea.
But if it was withdrawn, there would be no difference, because it's about the site in terms of, if you like, utilising the cost of the application. Councillor Byrne, and I'll take a vote.
Thank you. Question to officers here. I noticed the objection from Highways talking about the visibility. From what I recall of the road, the visibility, well, let me put it another way. Would that condition be mitigated by a wider sort of bell opening? Or do you feel it's just the turnings on the road itself?
It's usually a combination of things. So I think the alignment of the road here, there are bends in the road, as well as visibility. I haven't been to the site, so I don't know the specific circumstances, but if, for example, you've got a nice native hedge or tree row or within 200 metres on neighbouring land, what I'm getting at is, to create the accepted visibility space, if you had to take out native hedgerow and trees, we wouldn't be keen on that. So, and whether it's achievable within the land ownership.
It's more about the visibility displays and speed of cars along the lane, the volume of cars, and one of the comments made by the officers in the report was that no traffic survey had been done. It's not hard to do a traffic survey, and any good agent would recommend it. And in fact, because we deferred this for 4 weeks, there was ample time to have gone and done that as well if they felt that would have contributed to it. So evidence provided would inform the officers, and without that evidence, it's not for the officers to go and seek the evidence, it's for the applicant to provide that. All right. Well, I'm going to take a vote on that. So the proposal is for refusal of the application. Those supporting refusal, please raise your hands. I don't think there are any exceptions. That's unanimous. Unanimous, yes. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the decision today, but I think you've got the idea of where you need to go with this, and that there is a support for your sort of, agriculture and how you can diversify. So please don't take the refusal personally. I think there are issues. Yeah, thank you very much. So, I'm sorry it took a little bit longer today to get there. Thank you. Thank you. The next application is RR2022. Sorry, my apologies. RR2022/2230/P, and that's the quarries in Ticehurst. And this is an application that's come to the committee because it's the applicant is in some way related to the council. Right, go on. Is it you, Matthew?
It is me again, I'm afraid. Yes, thank you, Chair. As you've explained, this is being reported to Planning Committee as the applicant is related to an elected member. The proposal relates to an established agricultural holding, a working farm. They have two agricultural dwellings on the site, which are restricted by condition. One is occupied by a farmer, who is due to retire soon. The other property is currently vacant, but is in a very poor state of repair. The site is located in the countryside in AONB. The proposal, as explained, relates to a dilapidated property. It's a prefab structure built in the 1960s. The proposal is to build a replacement which would overlap the existing footprint, so it would be relocated slightly north. Next slide. This slide shows the elevational design, so chalet-style bungalow, got a clay tile roof. The pitch on it is relatively steep, brickwork, tile hanging, so relatively typical of what you see in the AONB. We have consulted a rural estate surveyor during the application. They confirm that the tests for an agricultural worker's dwelling have been met. They have advised it would provide modern, appropriate accommodation for an agricultural worker. The scale of the sheep business requires a full-time agricultural worker, and the accounts provided are indicative of a viable and sustainable business capable of financing the cost of the construction. So I did mention the current farmer is due to retire soon. He would stay in the dwelling he resides in at the moment, which is permitted by the condition. In his place, he needs another full-time worker to run the farm. So the proposal would be slightly larger. It would involve having accommodation within the roof, but it's a modest increase in size. The design is acceptable from an officer point of view. Materials can be controlled by condition. We have no highway concerns or amenity issues, and for these reasons it's recommended to approve.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions or comments on this application? Yes, Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chairman. Why was the rural estate surveyor not consulted on the first application? And that's the first question. I've got two questions. I can't remember what the second was.
He works for that
Enough already. Oh, enough already. I'm getting old.
Right, I'll answer. Yes, there was an application before this one that was refused. It did include quite a large garage as well. We didn't consult the rural estate surveyor because no information was submitted on the existing farm setup.
Oh, right.
And it was just, well, there's no justification. The current dwelling was vacant. We didn't know the farming activities going on, and it was more. It hasn't been demonstrated that there's a need for this replacement, and why would you grant permission for a replacement if there's no farming going on? And so that's where we were. This time round, we've got all the evidence, and the Royal Estate Surveyor...
And that's what permits
a
recommendation for approval.
Yeah, there's justification there. It's a well-established farm, and, it will finance the rebuild. There's a need for a full-time agricultural work. It meets all the policy tests.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's Councillor Projak.
Just a question along those lines, really, because so every time a farmer retires, we have to have either a replacement or a new building for the next generation, do we? Or what happens to the existing farmers' building? Does that change then from having an agricultural restriction? Years and years ago, that was the way you got new dwellings in the countryside. The farmer would retire and say, oh dear, I need a house for my son or daughter, not usually daughter. I just that question over that, creating new dwellings. I know this is a replacement, so it's a little bit different.
It's all based on the agricultural needs. So, I mean, the conditions historically have been written that a retired farmer or widower can stay living in an agriculturally tied property. In this case, there's already 2 agricultural dwellings on the site, so it's a little bit different. If someone came along with a new proposal, they have to comply with the policy. There has to be an agricultural need. There can't be any other suitable dwellings nearby that are available. It's all those old, usual policy tests.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to recommend that we
proposing approval.
Thank you. Sorry, losing the will to live. Yes, that I support the recommendation.
You're moving your group.
Yes. You only get to third. Councillor Gandy remembered what to say. It's a problem we all have. So we have a proposal seconded to approve. Can I have a show of hands who supports approval of this? I think that's a unanimous vote. Thank you. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
11.
Michael, are you with us? We have your presentation online. He's there, I can see he's there, but I can't see his face. Here he comes.
Hello.
Thank you. It's over to you, Michael.
Thank you. So good afternoon. The next application for consideration is RR 2022-1538P. And it is for the erection of a bungalow and changes to the ground levels currently of the existing house, and the changes to the ground levels retrospective. Next slide, please, Mike.
You're a little faint, Michael. Could you speak up a bit?
Oh, yeah, no problem. Sorry. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So as you can see from the site location plan, the site lies just to the east of Oakley, which is an already established 2-storey dwelling. The site itself is within the development boundary as defined within the DASA, and it is therefore within an area where there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. So as you can see, planning permission is sought for the erection of a 3-bedroom single-storey dwelling, hipped roofed, and this would be accessed off Woodland Way, as you can see just to the north, and there would be space to the front of the dwelling, which would provide free spaces off-street car parking. Next slide, please, Miles. So as you can see, that is the proposed elevations. As you can see, the hip roof from the front, as well as an internal garage. The external materials would comprise of brickwork and tiles. However, no further details have been submitted, so there's been a condition added requesting these details should the application be approved. The dwelling itself would host 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, an ensuite, a living and dining area, a kitchen, and a internal garage. As you can see from this next slide, these are just some proposed sections of the proposed development, and should give you an idea of the current land levels at the moment. So as you can see, that area in yellow on the left-hand side, that represents an area of flat land, and that's where the dwelling would be positioned. So the proposed dwelling would sit upon the built-up land levels and would be visible from the 1066 pathway and recreation park, as I think you should be able to see on the next slide. That view. As you can see, yeah, so the picture on the left shows the view from the public footpath, and the bottom right shows the view from the recreation ground. It is considered that the dwelling would be seen in the context of the built development that forms part of the development boundary for Crowhurst, and it's considered that the development would not substantially change or detrimentally affect views into or out of the site, and the single-storey nature of the dwelling would ensure that it would not appear as a dominant addition to the landscape. Existing views from the recreation park and 1066 pathway towards the site are residential nature, and this would not be altered for the addition of this proposed dwelling. It is noted that you can see on the top left-hand side picture, that's the land levels as they've been built up. So as you can see, they've been built up to create a flat area of land, and they are partially screened from vegetation from the footpath and the recreation ground. In terms of neighbouring amenity, the proposed dwelling would be separated from Oakley by 3.8 metres, and it's considered that due to the separation distance, single-storey nature of development and hip roof, that it is not considered that it would give rise to unacceptable levels of loss of light, outlook or overbearing. And there's also no ground floor windows on the eastern elevation of Oakley, as you can see from the photo on the top right. And hence the windows installed on the western elevation of the proposed dwelling would not lead to any harmful overlooking to Oakley. In regards to the properties located along Woodland Way to the north, these are over 20 metres away from the proposed dwelling, and it is not considered that their amenity would be adversely affected by the proposed dwelling. I do note that concerns have been raised regarding stability of the essentially man-made platform that's being created, and ultimately it is the applicant or the developer's responsibility to ensure that the development is safe. However, in this case, it is thought prudent to add a condition requiring a site stability assessment to be completed and submitted to the council for review before development commences. Building control were consulted on the application, but they do not wish to make a comment at this stage, and they would deal with that as part of a building regulation application. So overall, in general, it's considered that the site lies within the development boundary as defined within the DASA, and therefore it is within an area where the presumption that development could be acceptable in principle subject to other policies and local plan, and it's considered that the land levels and dwelling is considered to be appropriately designed for this location and would provide a good standard of amenity for future occupiers and would not have an adverse impact on neighbouring amenities, the surrounding locality or ecological designations, and the application is therefore recommended for approval subject to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for that. We have Julie Lowe, who's the clerk from Crowhurst Parish Council, to speak. Welcome, Julie. Your first time to the planning committee. It's We always very much appreciate the representatives from the Parish Council to come forward, so thank you very much for that. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you for having me. Unfortunately, no councillors were available to come today, so they have nominated me as the parish clerk. The Parish Council objected to this application because of the lack of information contained within the documentation provided to Rother. With regard to the engineering works on the land has been left unstable for a significant amount of time, and this has had a detrimental effect on neighbours. We are also concerned about potential contamination of the land, as we were made aware of significant earth movements with spoil brought onto the land. The council made a number of complaints to the council's enforcement team about this work in April of last year, which is when the work started, and not in June, as the applicant claims in his application. We have a number of concerns regarding the stability of the land, as there are no plans included about how the works and terracing will be stabilised and the banks safely retained. There is ongoing land slippage onto the neighbouring property below, and for another neighbour, their garden boundary is now a steep drop, which we feel is a health and safety issue. Without extra information regarding the engineering works carried out and how this would be made safe, we felt that we had to object. The application for the bungalow is on ground affected by the earthworks that we are objecting to, so this has also caused a problem for us in our decision. We have concerns about the stability of the land that the bungalow is due to be sited upon, and how a new property and its curtilage would affect surface water runoff to the neighbouring property below. Having gone from a vegetated slope, there is now a much steeper slope with several pipes that would appear to channel water from the applicant's garden towards the neighbour. The bungalow will be close to boundary trees that have TPOs on them. No information was provided about how these will be protected during works or going forward, as some of these trees are likely to overhang the bungalow. Any pilling for foundations could interfere with the trees that have TPOs on them. The proposed bungalow would be visible from the recreation ground and 1066 path during winter when there is no foliage on the trees. There is no plan showing the garden and parking spaces and what level the new building would sit at compared to the existing building. Is the surface for the car parking going to be porous, or will that add to surface water runoff? How will the applicant deal with the impact on the private roadway and the nuisance to neighbours? The water main has already been affected, and there are no details as to how this would be protected during the proposed works. In summary, the council objects to both the engineering works and the application for the bungalow for the following reasons: highway safety and traffic and additional movement of lorries during the works, no details on parking, potential effect on trees with TPOs, surface water runoff issues due to the change in levels of the garden and the extra hard standing associated with the new bungalow, effects on the sightlines from the 1066 country path and the recreation ground.
Thank you very much. Do we have some questions? Yes, Councillor Ganley.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your presentation today. What action was taken by enforcement following your complaints to the enforcement team in, well, more than a year ago, 18 months ago?
I believe they've spoken to the applicant. I don't know in terms of what they've done in terms of following up. There has been a new pipe that has been recently added.
Okay.
But I'm quite a new clerk at Crowhurst, so I'm afraid I'm not really au fait with the history of this going back
Yeah, so just, I mean, the enforcement is separate from the application
Yes,
itself. So,
yes, yeah.
I mean, if they have done something they shouldn't have done, enforcement would hopefully have addressed it appropriately. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You have a go? Have a go.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, do you know if any engineering... Well, what I did notice was a 50-foot, well, in fact, it's about 30-foot, actually, to the west. I don't know if you're familiar with the site. Are you familiar with the site?
I'm not, I'm afraid.
Okay, so it's
I'm
me
really
asking
there.
the question.
I'll come that off in a minute because we had some discussions about that separately. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Yes, Councillor Projak.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for coming. Huge respect for Crowhurst Parish Council and what they've done in terms of the environment. Fantastic work. Well, I was going to ask about the trees, because when we were on site, we saw trees that will be sort of adjacent to the new building, but also at the back of the existing bungalow. There's trees that earth has been scraped away. Is that just the length of the site, or is that where complaints have come from? That people complaining about the back of the site?
Yes, I think it's the boundaries of the proposed sites, as well as the ones that will be overhanging the proposed building. There are other existing TPOs and complaints about trees. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Barnes.
Could I just ask a bit about the nuisance caused to the neighbours by runoff, did you say?
Yes.
The whole site looked incredibly boggy and soggy, but how has that affected the neighbours?
I believe it's additional amounts of water just pouring down.
You mean as a result of the weather recently? Or
no, I think this has been going on for some time. I think it's the removal of the vegetation means that more surface water is coming down. I believe. I'm not 100% sure.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. You had to wait quite a while to hear this, but so thank you for that, and we'll discuss the matter now. So I can open the floor to discussion. I think just one issue to clarify, because I did have quite a discussion with Miles about the back of the site where you saw the cliff, that had been created through, and presumably that's where the soil came to build it up. I don't know exactly, but it looks like it. That is actually outside the red line of the plan, so we can't actually consider that as part of the application. But I think the development management are going to have some discussion with East Sussex County Council, because that sort of soil movement is under their authority, if you like. So that's that. I had just a question for clarification for Michael. Could you go back to the levels? I just want people to understand this level issue. So, Michael, can you explain? You're showing on this plan the house on the top diagram. Yep. Then the next diagram shows sort of a level out from that, and then the next one shows a build-up. Now, that build-up on the bottom one, is that the build-up that exists today, or is that a proposed extra build-up?
No, that's the build-up that exists today.
That's the build-up that exists today.
Yep, I got clarification from the agent that as you see it on that's how it exists. The only thing added to that is just the building on top, but that's how the land exists at the moment. Yeah.
And what is the situation in relation to your opinion that it's made up land is very, very wet? I mean, it's extraordinarily wet when we went there the other day with a gully running through to take the water off. I appreciate that there's conditions in there to ensure stability of the land, but is the land actually stable enough to support a house? I mean, this is going beyond a condition. This is work that's been done to then generate a proposal. That part of it's retrospective. So we're being asked to give permission not only for the house but a retrospective element, which if that retrospective part had been brought to us unmade up, would we have agreed for that level of fill to be created there?
It's hard to say if it's safe or not. I tried to get building control to comment on it, and they didn't wish to comment on it. So I think that's maybe a wee bit out of my expertise. If it's the land itself is actually safe, not sure if Miles or anyone can add to that, but I'm not sure on that. But in terms of the impact to the wider locality, I think if you maybe go back a slide or two to show views onto the site. You can't really see much of a change. The vegetation on the eastern boundary of the slope screens the slope quite well. So I don't think in terms of visual impact, there's not that much an impact in that regard. But I'm not in terms of the stability of it. I'm not sure. Answer the parish's question on water. I I think I had a few emails from the neighbours, and it is due to do with runoff from the site. And I also believe that there's been a drain installed underneath the ground that isn't permitted as part of this, and that's why full drainage condition has been requested. So I think that's an issue that council picked up, but it's not been approved as part of this.
But if the applicant had come to us without having done the work that's been done on the ground and said, I want to build this ground up by, it's quite a substantial amount. I mean, it's probably that, I can't tell you, can't work out, but it's several metres. But here's an application for a house, and I'd like to build the ground up by several metres for a very long distance, changing the landform substantially. Would that have been acceptable? Because that's actually what you're asking us to approve here. You're not just asking us to approve the house, you're asking us to approve the retrospective to say, was this change in the landform acceptable? That's the question that sits with me. And I'm sorry if I'm sort of taking the lead on this before giving Councillor Curtis, because I do want him to, it's your call in. I will do, yeah, don't worry. You'll be there. But I just want to clarify this for everyone beforehand, because it might help.
Yeah, no, I think it would be. In terms of views onto the site, there's not much of a harm of the build-up in land, and it's in the development boundary. So I would probably say it's okay. I would probably say it's okay because there's not much of a visual harm in regards to the build-up of the land. It's still screened. It still looks the same. You can't really see that build-up of the land. You might be able to see it in winter slightly, but I would probably say that I think it's maybe in the report as well that the build-up in lands wouldn't have a detrimental effect on the character and appearance of the area or neighbouring residential amenities. So I would probably approve that as well if it was just for the land levels.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Curtis, your show.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your lead. We're caught between the rock and a hard place on this because it's been a big issue in Crowhurst with this land movement and earth movements over at least the last year, which I think would be fair to say had they not have done what they've done and what we're being asked to approve retrospectively probably wouldn't have been approved. The fact that there was lack of enforcement taken about this it's given us a big problem because now they've actually created the basis for the build, and according to the planning officer, it falls within the bounds required for approval. It's a difficult one because I disagree. I mean, it's all been done by stealth. It's caused a lot of issues, and with my fellow committee members, when we went on Tuesday, I mean, I was quite shocked actually that of what actually has been done. And then, although it can't be taken into consideration, there was that rock face or the earth face up on where all the trees were. Well, I guess that there's only one way that those trees are going to come down at some point. Unless they're going to put something, they've got to have some. I know it's not an issue on this application, Chair, but if it just concerns us sometimes, I think, because if they're prepared to do detrimental damage to the landscape prior to any building, we perhaps should take that into account when considering the application. The other thing, obviously, again, we're being caught out by this retrospective element. And previous works have been carried out regardless of it, without regard to anything. But just on the basic, we've already spoken about the stability of the land. And just looking through the notes, it's a bit lacking in detail because, especially as you've already alluded to the fact that the site is wet. Obviously, we've had inclement weather just recently, but it's a wet site. There's no details yet of foul and surface water removal, samples of the building materials and the landscaping details, which I think actually should be paramount in allowing us to make any decision today. Thank you.
Just to say on these points, I think the enforcement thing, again, does need to be looked at separately. A respective plan application is a legitimate way to regulise any kind of development, one. Two, a lot of this excavation works, it seems to me that's a county matter, and that may be why there wasn't anything further done by officers. It may well be that it's the county that needs to look into this for action. I think, thirdly, in terms of trees, we can add a condition, a standard condition requiring their replacement if they should die or fall or in other way not be present, that they should, or alien, that they can be replaced. Pre-commencement conditions here, perhaps the most pertinent is condition 6. It's no development, not above ground works, no development shall take place till details of a full site investigation, including stability reports, with a scheme for remedial preventive works has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority and completed in accordance with those details. There's no works above grounds for hard and soft landscaping details to be submitted and approved. No development, pre-commencement completely, for provision of foul and surface water drainage, and no development of ground levels to do with materials. That's less pertinent, but 7, it does say no development shall commence to indications of all existing trees and hedgerows on the land, including details of those to be retained together with measures for their protection in the course of development have been submitted and approved by the local planning authority. Now that's pertinent, I think, for the construction phase in particular, but we can add a condition, as I said before, requiring a replacement if they within 5 years, which is a standard condition. So I hope that helps.
Yes, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. General question for officers. When we see building control, paragraph 6.3, it says generally drainage and structure of the building will be reviewed as part of our process once they have made application. Now, if at some point it's decided that virtually no building over a certain weight will be sustainable on that sort of slope, will building control be able to say, no, this is the wrong place?
Well, I mean, that would be a matter for them. I mean, we're looking at it from planning merits, and we're looking at what conditions we can impose to make it acceptable. And I think that's what we have before us. Now, they would be subject to different legislation, different enforcement, and different time periods for taking enforcement action. But yes, they could theoretically take action.
I think, they could put giant piles down right through to the original soil underneath, and that, that would not be unusual, be expensive, but not unusual. I think the issue here is actually one of whether retrospectively, the retrospective part is an unacceptable change in the landform or not. I think that's what you probably need to be considering here. The principle of a house here is there's no issue. It's within a development boundary. You can build houses on slopes in different ways. So, but are you happy with the change in the landform? I think that is really the central issue here. The issue of stability can be dealt with by proper surveys and proper construction. But as I said, that's probably the single issue here. It is within a development boundary. There is a presumption in favour of development. That's it. So that's what you have to contemplate.
But we are being asked to approve.
We are being asked to approve
a building in that particular position.
Correct.
When the objectors are saying the position is wrong, it will do damage to the surrounding area. It will do damage to the trees. The ground is not. The drainage is not sustainable to the property. It impacts on properties around it. So we are being able to. We're being asked to approve a building in a particular position.
Well, for any building, they have to. It's in the development boundary, so there is a presumption in favour of development. Drainage is always dealt with by condition. So to come up with a proper drainage scheme which would ameliorate any issues with water movement elsewhere, and so that's an issue. that is dealt with by condition, and it's straight as simple as that, really. I mean, the only issue here is one-off change of landform, and that's where you have to go if you're thinking about this, because fundamentally it is an acceptable location for a development. The issue about trees is once again conditionable in terms of root protection. Those trees are quite a way away, so it would be hard to imagine those trees would be affected by the development. I mean, the canopy was nowhere near the site, so the roots are nowhere near the site, the main roots. I've got Councillor Langlands first, I think.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether I should be directing this at Michael, but the fact that it says that the land in question, 2.2, is to the east of Oakley and has been built up by imported soil, ecologically, I'm sort of a bit concerned about imported soil. Do we trace where this soil has come from? The contamination of the soil? Do we do any of that in an ecology report to just ensure that that entire area is safe ecologically to have had that soil dumped in it, basically? Because I know there's considerable issues about farming and dumping soil on farmland, so where are we with this?
Condition 9, 10 deal with ecological matters. As condition 9 more in particular, because there was the ecologist who was consulted, who gave, there's no objections, but also the ecology reports, and it's section 4 of that, which is, I think, for mitigation measures. So that condition requires works to be in accordance with those measures.
Clearly, round the table, we are expressing quite heavy concerns about this application. But the way you're leading us to address those concerns is to refuse the earthworks but approve the dwelling. Refuse the dwelling and the application in terms of the earthworks.
It's for you to consider whether the change in the landform is an acceptable change in the landform. It's as simple as that. You're dealing with a retrospective, but you're dealing with it. If this came to you now, would you approve the change in the landform? That's what you're considering. Not the house, not the location of the house, because they are within a development boundary, and so there is a presumption in favour of development. And the house is very similar to the one next door and the ones around, so the actual form of the house is, there's nowhere to go if you don't like that. Those elements you should put to the side. That is the singular thing that you really need to contemplate here. And I'm not directing you either way, I'm asking you to consider that. Yes, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, when I visited the site, there's about a 25-foot drop, I think, or 30-foot drop from the next door garden, and then of course the trees. We're talking about if this is orientated correctly, to the west, and literally, if the next door neighbour steps over the fence, he's got a 30-foot drop, and that to me, it obviously some severe, soil work's gone in there to move a lot of earth, and despite the fact it's probably unstable, which I know is not, what we're looking at. But, yeah, surely a lot of work has gone in to change the form of the land.
Chair, I think the point that Councillor Langman was making about the ecological matters, it's not to do with the wildlife, but it's to do with the quality of the soil which has been brought in, which could be its acidity, its contamination, matters of that sort, about which we know absolutely nothing. Nobody has submitted any sort of expert statement to say that it's safe or non-polluting or not changing the acidity in order to wreck the environment. We just don't know. Or indeed carrying diseases.
I mean, the movement of soil is a county issue. And that's a question, because I don't think they were consulted on the matter to know whether they would think that was a good thing or a bad thing. So another alternative is to seek counties' advice on that matter in terms of the soil movement. I mean, this is an issue. What's your suggestion here, Miles, or Matt, or Michael?
I'll try. If this is a concern for members, it would, for me, be a suitable reason for deferral, as it is part of the overall development of the sites. But I think we must again be cautious that this is the sole reason for deferral, as I understand it.
Well, I think you could probably say you could say the soil movement and a further assessment on the landscape impact as well. I mean, the officer has taken a point of view on that, but there seems to be some differences on that.
Well, I mean, certainly, let's have a look at soil movement levels. I'm not sure about impacts on landscape here.
I think we should be consulting county on this because of the earth movement, and they may choose to have a look at the whole site as well.
Have we got legal?
Jaspreet, are you with us here?
Certainly his lunch.
Jaspreet, are you with us? Hello.
He is, isn't he? I wonder what course he's on.
Yeah. No. There you go on.
Meantime, while we're looking for Jaspreet, I'm nearly forgetting what my question was. Yes, no, it's the land. It's the soil. I mean, if this soil has been imported, do we actually know that East Sussex know about this, or County Council generally knows about this? Because this is part of the retrospective side, isn't it? That word again.
Michael, are you with us? Can you comment on whether county has been involved in looking at the soil movement at all, the import of soil, as well as the soil movement on site? Yes.
I'm not sure if they have been or not. I was just checking the application to see if they provide any details on where the soils came from, but I'm
Ask Jaspreet on the microphone too.
Jaspreet, are you with us? No, he's still not.
Yeah, I don't think there is any details submitted on where the spoil came from, but you could consult East Sussex County Council Minerals Waste Department and get maybe more information for them to see if they have had any involvement in it, or they know about it, or that they've agreed to it. That's all I have.
Thank you for that. Councillor Curtis, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions. Well, the first one is actually the question about the soil. It was imported onto the site. There was lorry loads of it. It caused huge problems in the village from the transportation side. Anyway, that aside, my other question is some advice from officers, really, because correct me if I'm wrong, that we have a choice here of either approving or refusing the application, or deferring it for reports from county. Yeah, thank you. No question, but I've forgotten.
It's a little bit of an issue. I can only suggest you write them down in the future. Councillor Langlands, then we might try and round this one up.
No, it's just I wondered if these absences were being minuted.
Well, if somebody could remember that, we can.
My issue is, if county then say that soil needs removing, we don't have a planning application, do we? So I think possibly it's absolutely vital. If there needs to be an enforcement and that soil is contaminated or moved illegally or whatever, does that mean there's no application?
Councillor Barnes, quick one, and then we'll go to
an overall point about tipping, really, and that is that having experienced 2 sites in my patch where it has been a big issue on farms, they would normally have to apply for a licence to tip without giving any idea at all of how much. But of course, all these tons and tons of stuff come in. When you then talk to the county, they say, well, we'll get our environment people. But the problem with tipping is it seems to fall between 2 stools. It's between county and Rother, and neither takes overall responsibility. It's actually something that I've actually taken to both the MPs locally and said something has got to be done about this because it's very, very unsatisfactory.
All right, so I think, to make life easy, I'll propose deferral for county to be fully consulted on the movement of soil on the site and the import of soil on the site. Is that a satisfactory recommendation?
Thirded.
Sorry, Gary, did you want to say something? Did you remember your other question? Okay. All right, so that's the proposal. Are you happy with that proposal, Miles? Matt, are you happy with it? And further understanding of the impact of the landscape changes. So we should seek advice on that if we can. Is everyone happy with that proposal? We've got a seconder for that? Yeah, sorry, yeah.
So you mentioned not only the ecology and the composition of the soil, but actually whether the soil could bear the weight because it compacts. So
I think that's unfortunately that's an issue for stability. Once they get they have to ensure that the stability is there if they get approval. This step is to say where does the soil come from? Should it have come in? And they will look at presumably the rest of the site in terms of where that's come in as well. So, and is it contaminated? So that's the proposal. Defer for those 2 reasons. Those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous. And thank you for coming today, Julie.
All right, are we not doing anything on stats?
We are.
Yes.
Oh, we are. So we are now on to the part where Miles can gloat about the improvement in statistics, and rightly so too. Would you like to sort of zip us through these? And I know, zip.
I'm just seeing if I can possibly find. Is there anything here? No, it's not here. It's okay. I'll take you through.
Go on.
These are the stats up to for the second quarter. Thank you, Matt. Up to the end of September, there was 324 applications received, 384 were determined. There are 354 on hand. Now, to put this in context, that if you look at those which are determined and on hand, you're looking at something which is around about where it was in 2019 to 2020. As you know, it went all the way up to over 800 at one point. Just over a year ago, it's now down to where it was before the backlog started to become a real issue. And I think that's good work. I think it's very positive. In fact, since then, it's gone down about 25 more. So about 325, 330, yes. Now, what I'd say on this is that's testament to the hard work for the last year or so in particular. And this is very much something I'd like to commend to you. In terms of timeliness as well, so far this year it's been 100% for major applications in time. That, of course, is also subject to to a extension of time for minor applications because of the volume that it was going down towards the 60s. It's now gone up significantly since the last quarter to 78%, which takes it to almost where we were in 1920. And other applications came in at 87 for the quarter, which is where we... 2019 to 2020. Sorry, I should have made that clearer. Yes. Well, 1920 is an abbreviation, but I get your point. I do get your point. Yeah. You know, it was, the roaring 20s. Yeah. Yes, before there was a planning system. Anyway, just to go on a little bit further, I would say too that the total application on hand is 445, which again takes it back to the 2019-2020 era in terms of numbers. I think one thing that is remarkable and has been commented on is the appeals lodged. There's been over 100 in the last 4 quarters, but the number is going down, declining from 36 lodged last quarter of last year to 27 this year. Good results this week, which I'll go on to in a minute. But what we're also seeing is only about 40 of these have been determined. So it does, to a large part, explain why there's so many live appeals at the moment. There is a backlog within the planning inspectorate. Also, I'm hopeful that with this large number of applications determined and a more positive approach, we should be seeing less appeals come in. They go down to where they were, going back to 2-3 years ago when far fewer were being lodged, maybe 60, 65 a year. Sorry, is there a question?
Just a question on appeals,
Yes.
Marsh, is that we recently had an announcement for councils who were going to be allowed to do quick process appeals. We weren't on the list, Wilden was. Do you know why, how they choose those?
No, I don't, sorry. I mean, nothing came to me either.
It was a recent announcement.
No, it hasn't come to me, sorry. So it's something, if you're aware of it and we're not, yeah, okay. In terms of planning enforcement, 130 were received in the last quarter. That's second only to the third quarter of 2021. 123 are determined, and what we're seeing here is a consistently high number of applications come in. There are much more in, but we're maintaining the cases on hand at around the 256 mark. Now, of those determined, about 30% were remediated, about 50% were no breach, and only a handful were not expedient. So it's not that we're closing cases using the expediency rule in any great numbers at all. We actually seem to be resolving these largely through negotiation. There is the odd one resolved through formal enforcement action. Hello.
Can I make a point for you there?
Yeah.
In the last 4 quarters, a year, we've received 366 and processed 575. So I think that just shows you the increased rate of actually processing. Yeah, Councillor Barnes.
Just very quickly, and congratulations on bashing through all these.
Okay.
Can you make sure that the local member always knows what you're about to do? Because the speed sometimes with which you report an enforcement case and the speed with which a decision is taken without coming back to the member can sometimes be a bit embarrassing.
It's quite difficult given the number. In fact, you do get that updated list every week. I mean,
Sort of, just an email.
I'll see what I can do.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. And just there's a couple of additional things here too. Pre-applications received, completed. High numbers coming in the first 3 quarters, going from January of last year, 93, 63, 92. A slight backlog in terms of what's completed. Now, I think there is some things there. Some of these are where you're getting multiple service requests for one site. And what I've said to officers, really, for every pre-app, there should be a different reference so we can keep track of this more accurately. So we know what's being done in a timely manner and what isn't. But I think what it does show is the large numbers are coming in. They could always be larger, but I think the culture is beginning to change in terms of communication again, people to go through pre-app and seek to resolve issues before they even hit the officer's desk. Very good news in association with that is the PPA service, Plan Performance Agreements. We just had one engrossed today. That's another £30,000. That's raising a lot of money. So that's now around 100,000 plus mark. So by the end of the year, we're looking at, I think, in excess of a couple of 100,000 through discretionary services alone. Could well be somewhat higher than that, depending on timings. So what I say, the great thing about that is it builds not only in income, but it builds in robustness to the service. So when things are tough, and they will be at times, we'll lose staff, we'll get very high caseloads, maybe a lot of appeals, a lot of public inquiries where we're resource stretched. We have some potential there for resilience because of that discretionary service.
Can I make a point there also? The agreement has been reached with the officers, with Malcolm, Ben and Miles, that if we go 10% above that 350 on hand, that's for the PS1 and PS2s, that will trigger a review to bring on extra resources if that's looking like it's going to get worse. And so that in the past there's been no point at which people think we've got to look at this. So at least now there is a point at which everyone looks at it and says, do we need to bring on some additional resources to deal with this? Is it long term? Is it short term? Can we get over the hump? And I think that's a really, really important change. It doesn't. There's a point at which it's reviewed to prevent that blooming of applications.
I want to say, Miles, it's such a good news story here. And when we had the Agents Forum, which was, thank you for organising that, really was a sea change in the way they were talking about the planning department and planning applications and the service. It was extraordinary. Well done. And I think we should actually shout a bit more about this.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any? I know we're sort of running a little late today, but any questions on the numbers? Otherwise, we'll just go on to any questions on appeals, and then I know that we're going to close the session, and Ben's going to wants to have a few words with us. Any questions on appeals today? I think that most of them have been pretty covered off. There's been an improved result this week. You saw a lot of appeal decisions come out of which we were back to sort of the general rate of success. If there aren't any questions on this, then just note the date for the next time inspection, which is the 13th of December. And I'm going to close the meeting on that point. Thank you very much, Julie.